Plan Commission meeting of Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. Please start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wayne, would you please take roll?
Mr. Franz.
Present.
Mrs. Grabanowski.
Present.
Mr. Jones.
Larry Jones is actually present tonight.
Duly noted. Mrs. Walker.
Present.
Mr. Lake.
Present.
Mr. Fedor.
Present.
Mrs. Madrick. Ms. Madrick may be online. I don't know if IT sees her has logged in or not.
She been promoted?
We don't see her.
All right. Well, if she does join, please let us know. All right. So we have 6 people, so we do have a quorum. Any matter acted on tonight will take 4 votes. We have a continuous request, docket number 2021-23 PPA, the Park, 410 South 4th Street and 500 South Main Street. Petition request, petition for primary plat amendment to provide a central water system supporting a separate fire protection main as per section 193.056 of the subdivision control ordinance in the urban PUD planned unit development. Petitioner present?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Good evening. My name is Kyle Russateritz. I'm an attorney at the law firm Denton's in Indianapolis, 10 West Market Street, representing the petitioner MAP 1861 development relative to the requested plat amendment petition for the subdivision, the Park. My colleague Matt Price could not be here this evening as he had a previously scheduled meeting in another community. So he asked that I attend in person and request this continuance. Also here this evening are 2 other partners for the petitioner, Paul McCoy and Andrew Hurd. We're here this evening to request this continuance to allow additional time to work through some of the town's comments, specifically relative to specific components and specifications relative to the fire suppression system for the community. This has been sort of a 2-year collaborative process with the town on the matter. And really, we're just waiting on specifics from vendors and perhaps at their mercy as development is quite busy, as we all know. So we anticipate a quick resolution of these specific details, as really we're just focusing on the granular aspect. We have a meeting of the minds. We have a general understanding. So I know you have a busy docket this evening. I'll be brief and just respectfully request a continuance to resolve these details with staff.
All right, thank you. We have a request for continuance. Is there kind of any comments, questions on this matter?
Is 1 month sufficient?
I did have a specific conversation with Matt about that, expecting perhaps this question. In all honesty, 60 days would certainly get it done. Understand that if the board would like us to come back in 30 days and give an update, we would hope to have a resolution by then. But certainly would take your lead on that.
I think if you guys need 60 days, that's fine. Given that next month looks like it's gonna be a full docket also, so I would go ahead with the 60-day request. And that would be, what would be the date in September on that, Wayne?
Let's verify that.
20th, okay. So
20th,
September 20th. So any further questions, comments? Is there a motion to move this matter or continue this matter to the September 20th Plan Commission meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed by nay. Motion carries. Continuance granted. See you in 2 months.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Continued business from last month. Docket number 2021-20-Z, Town of Zionsville, 11281 and 11589 East County Road 200 South. Petition for zone map change to rezone 160 acres plus or minus from the R3 Rural Residential District as modified by instrument number 200700001388 to the Agricultural AG District. Wayne, are you handling this for the town?
Certainly, certainly. And as you indicated, this petition is a request for rezoning. This petition comes to you directly from your town council, who has passed a resolution requiring the Plan Commission, as state statute requires, to consider the petition that requires the staff to file a petition, which has been done, and then that petition be considered by the Plan Commission. Certainly, the staff report gives the analysis of the request. Certainly, the request in front of you is somewhat narrow. Do you or do you not move forward with the request and consider and provide a recommendation to the town council favorably or unfavorably to rezone this property in question, which is 160 acres, to the ag classification? In looking at the past history, and just in past history referring specifically to the last 2 years, where the town has been studying this area surrounding the airport, certainly, and as discussed last evening, and certainly as online and available for review, is a draft comprehensive plan amendment that recommends this property be rezoned to an open space classification, or a classification other than residential. Staff certainly is a part of that 2-year process, coming to you with that knowledge. And in substance, that is the essence of the recommendation here for your consideration from staff, is a rezoning to the agricultural classification. Staff is recommending that action this evening. Happy to take questions. And that concludes the presentation.
All right, thank you, Wayne. At this point, I'll ask if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak on this matter. If you would, please step forward and state your name and address.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Howard. I'm the attorney for the Hamilton County Airport Authority, the owner of the Indianapolis Executive Airport. My business address is 694 Logan Street in Noblesville. The Airport Authority comes to you in strong support of this petition. We have looked at the issues of compatibility and non-compatibility of the public use airport with residential uses. There is a statute in the state of Indiana that talks about a noise sensitive area, and that area is supposed to is a nautical mile, and it's about 3,200 feet wide on either side, and of our 1,600 feet wide of the center line. And the statute provides that before you build in a noise sensitive area, that you have to file the builder has to file a permit and record it in the chain of title, putting people on notice. Well, we didn't oppose Fieldstone and Brookhaven, even though they were partially in this area. We thought that statute worked, and it put people on notice that there was going to be an airport in that area. What didn't work, and your predecessors and the people in the town have gotten plenty of calls from people. We didn't know there was an airport there, and we've still heard the same thing from people. And so that statute didn't work. And then in 2006, the property that is the subject matter of this rezone was zoned an A3, or I'm sorry, an R3. And in that zoning of R3, there were specific covenants that were put in place and recorded by the property owner, the same property owner that's going to be before you in the next agenda item. And they provided that in both the recorded plat and the covenants, there would be numerous items placed in the record to put potential home buyers, not only the initial home buyers, but subsequent home buyers, on notice that the airport's there. And those included an acknowledgement that this was an AZ zone, and the airport had a right to be at the airport, that it had been a public use airport for years, and it had a right to be there, that they could experience significant levels of aircraft operations, and that the landowner accepted title with full knowledge of this existence. Those covenants were recorded and they were labeled material representations and commitments to induce zone map change. The question is that enough to put people on notice that their new dream home that they're buying might be in a noise sensitive area? There are days that if you were at that home or at the model home for an hour and a half, you would know there were airplanes flying over, and there's days that you would not. But essentially, the private covenants issues have not worked. The fact that the next petitioner is coming up is prima facie evidence that those are not significant, that those covenants made in 2006 are not significant enough to require people to place potential buyers on notice. So the airport authority strongly supports the town's position to move forward and to rezone this as agricultural land. There may come a day that there are some commercial uses that might be able to go on this property where nobody cares if airplanes are flying over. But residents are a different story. And we think, in all fairness to your future constituents who might buy a house in this area, that this zoning should be taken back to agricultural zoning. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
For the record, Mike Andrioli, 1393 West Oak Street in Zionsville. I'm very familiar with Mr. Howard's rendition of what occurred back a number of years ago. I represented the Cato family and Producers Realty in seeking that particular rezoning. As to the commercial use, we tried that. We filed an initial petition for rezoning for commercial use. None of the neighbors wanted commercial use, and the commissioners were not inclined to go ahead and allow a commercial use on County Road 200, given the fact that it would have to be big box uses. You're talking about heavy trucks and those types of things, and they didn't feel it was well suited. So we didn't get very far with the commercial, but we did file and received approval from the commissioners to rezone a portion of the Cato property, specifically the area of ground that's south and out of the runway protection zone. And that's extremely important. There will be no houses in the runway protection zone. The noise sensitive area goes all the way down through Brookhaven and the Drees development specifically, and then all the way down into Sanders. I did all of those developments for Mark Sanders, and we had all of those specifics in that particular covenants for the Willows and Willow Ridge. All of those were in there at that time because part of that area actually was in the noise protection area, and everything north of County Road 300 up to 200 was also in the noise protection area. All of that was in there. I must tell you, I'm a little surprised that this is being put forth by the airport authority because of some noise complaints. I mean, I thought that goes with the job if you're a commissioner sitting on an airport authority. I thought noise complaints and those types of things come with the job, but it's certainly not a reason or basis to go ahead and take my client's rights and rezone this property back to an ag zoning classification. If you notice in the particular zoning ordinance itself, and I sent a letter to you, I think in May, because I was going to be out of town. So I'm not going to go over all of that because you've had an opportunity to read that and understand what we were saying in that particular letter. But this is essentially a smart move on behalf of the airport authority to try to convince the town of Zionsville to go in and seek a rezone for this particular property. And then when the challenges start coming, the airport authority will be as far back as a general in World War II off the front lines. They won't be involved in the lawsuit. They've asked you to go ahead and carry their baggage for them and go ahead and rezone this particular parcel. There's nothing about the proposed development that you're going to hear that causes any difficulty from a protection standpoint for the airport. There's not any single family residence that's going to be in the airport protection zone. And interestingly enough, when we did this back years ago, and you'll see as part of the exhibit that was furnished to you, we had Wolpert Engineering was the consultant for the airport. They did the exhibit for us, showing the airport protection zone, so we could plan our development around that and not have any of those developments occur in there. Most significantly, I think, and you may feel this is significant, that will be up to your good judgment. But I think it's significant that even though Mr. Howard has suggested to you, there's been complaints with regard to noise from some of the people in Brookhaven and others. This property has been rezoned for what, 13 years? They've had an opportunity to go in and condemn this property and buy this property and take it for that entire period of time. If during that period of time, they have the right of eminent domain, they could have gone in, and if you have any questions about that, ask your counsel. They have a right of eminent domain. They could have purchased this ground or taken this ground years ago if they thought it was important. Now they're coming in at the last minute after the Catos have already sold it to somebody and asking you to somehow or another deny the Catos what we believe their rights. With me tonight is the members from the Cato Family Producers Realty, also Chris Ferguson and Yasmin Stump from Yasmin Stump Law, who will also represent them depending on what occurs with regard to these particular petitions. One thing I was curious about, I saw in the staff report, and maybe I didn't get a recent version of it, but Wayne will correct me if I'm wrong, so I apologize. But I saw in the staff report, there was a suggestion that somehow or another, the board, if you rezone the property, also put a provision or a commitment in there that the property will have no cluster subdivisions. I think I saw that in Wayne's staff report. If that's in there, I have a rhetorical question for council. This is not a zone text amendment. This is a zone map amendment. That has not been properly noticed. If you're going to change the text of the zoning ordinance, moreover, how is it that the town of Zionsville can ask for a commitment on property that they don't own to put that commitment on this particular property? I think that raises substantial questions. I didn't notice it the first time I read it, and then when I read it again, it kind of popped up to me. So I'd asked that rhetorical question because we have substantial concerns with regard to being able to impose a commitment on property that's not owned by the town of Zionsville. Normally, those voluntary commitments are signed and executed and recorded by the landowner. Well, I don't know how the town can impose those commitments on the property of another without having any ownership or fee simple title relationship to that particular property. Moreover, it hasn't been properly noticed. So we would respectfully suggest, especially in light of the fact you're going to have an agenda item that received a favorable staff report that complied with complied with your comprehensive plan, to go ahead and move forward with the development consistent with the commitments that were made back a number of years ago when we did the rezoning. That they're only wanting to cluster the development on the south side. They're going to keep the north side open and available. Would be available for a park or other open space, but certainly no single family homes in that particular area, and all of the other requirements under the noise sensitive area will have to be included in the covenants. So thank you for an opportunity to address you tonight. I was unavailable last night, so I wanted to make sure I made an appearance and addressed you tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this matter?
Good evening, everyone. Chris Ferguson, Yasmin Stump Law Group, 11495 North Pennsylvania Street, Suite 101. Following up on Mike's comments, I also represent, our office also represents Cato family as well as Producers Realty. Just wanted to have a couple things following up on what Mike had to say about the rezoning. And that is rezoning of my client's property from R3 to agricultural is being considered by the Plan Commission this evening. And my client does raise its objections to the rezoning pursuant for the following reasons. Town of Zionsville seeking to deprive my client's property of its highest and best use as an R3 use to a far less valuable agricultural designation through the rezoning process. The proposed rezoning from R3 to agricultural would significantly reduce the value of my client's property. And I'm sorry, some of this seems duplicate from last night, but again, it's a separate record, so I need to make that kind of clear. But again, the difference in per acre value between comparable sales of agricultural and R3 zone land in Boone County and in Zionsville is generally measured in tens of thousands of dollars per acre, and applied across at least 100 acres of my client's property stands to be in damages of millions of dollars. However, although my client stands to be deprived of millions of dollars of its private property use, no representative or agent of the town of Zionsville, the Indianapolis Executive Airport, or the Hamilton County Airport Authority has reached out to my client or its representatives in any capacity to discuss or propose an amicable resolution to this matter. And to be clear, the town of Zionsville is seeking to deprive my client of millions of dollars of private property rights without even picking up the phone to call them. Furthermore, the entirety of the conversation regarding the rezoning of my client's private property has only been summarily discussed as being needed to generalize noise and safety concerns. It has been briefly discussed that the rezoning would be in line with Federal Aviation Administration regulations. However, that has only been a generic conversation of which no such regulations or recommendations have had any kind of conversation in front of any town or any governmental body of the town of Zionsville. My client is in complete agreement that safety is an issue that must be addressed. However, addressing future safety issues does not excuse the deprivation of private property rights without government communication and just compensation. There is no controversy that the town of Zionsville has the authority to rezone my client's property. However, it must be noted on the record that any such rezoning that results in the significant devaluation of my client's property is tantamount to a regulatory taking and/or an inverse condemnation under well-established Indiana law. It should also be noted that the town of Zionsville and the Indianapolis Executive Airport and the Hamilton County Airport Authority have the ability to simply acquire this land through their eminent domain powers, though which they would acquire the property at the cost of its highest and best use and fair market value. I asked the Plan Commission to consider the position that my client has been placed in by the proposed rezoning so as to better understand its position. Although the Indianapolis Executive Airport's runway extension has been planned and considered since 2008, neither it nor the town of Zionsville ever contacted my client about the rezoning of the purchase of the property. As recently as, excuse me one moment. All right. My client believes that the legal use of its land as R3 would allow Zionsville to add to its growing community, add tax revenues to the town, and has already prior agreed with Boone County to have a portion of the property be used as an open space park for families. My client is a tax-paying landowner of Zionsville and only asks to be treated fairly in this process and be fully compensated for any damages done to his property by Zionsville. And a quick response to comments by Mr. Howard on behalf of the Airport Authority. The generic concern of phone calls being received by the Airport Authority and such complaints are noted. However, we fail to see any kind of real reasoning as to noise complaints over a telephone call, not lawsuits to any knowledge of mine or anybody else's, but phone calls are a reason for the rezoning of property. Also, that said, safety concerns have been raised last night during the Hamilton County Airport Authority's land use plan. And also we heard arguments saying that residences should not be placed near airports for safety considerations. However, that seems very contradictory considering the Airport Authority's proposed plan for Airport City and/or Airport Town, Airport Village. Those are the only two reasons that we have been given so far for the rezoning. They do not seem as though that would be a good reason to go through what will likely be a very dragged out litigation process if rezoning goes forward without any kind of compensation to my client. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. Kyle Lewis, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, 421 Aviation Way, Frederick, Maryland. I'm here this evening on behalf of our membership in the state of Indiana and also our membership at the airport, Indianapolis Executive. I want to just kind of follow up on some comments that have already been made. I think you're aware of many of the issues with noise complaints. Noise complaints are a symptom of already existing issues. Noise complaints lead to stifling of airport growth. When residences are put near an airport, anywhere around the airport for that matter, especially under the traffic pattern, which is a prescribed landing and takeoff course, if you want to think of it, around the airport. It's a rectangular, I don't have a chart, but I wish I did, a rectangular pattern, depending on which runway is being used at the airport. There are technically 2 runways at the airport, even though it's a single strip of pavement, depending on which way the wind is blowing. So if the wind is blowing from the south, they take off to the south. With that said, putting residences under the approach or departure path is just not common sense. It happens around the country. The noise complaints happen. The airport development becomes stifled. They could even shorten the length of the runway. City councils, county commissioners, they've all tried to change traffic patterns, which it's basically FAA regulation what the traffic patterns are. Those can't be arbitrarily changed. It's a pretty involved process to even talk about that. Something else in my letter I mentioned is the Indiana State Code that would require notification for the 7460 process, as it's known, which is the obstruction evaluation done by the FAA. I don't know if that's been completed with this proposed development, but that's something that would be required. It's a pretty lengthy, involved process with the FAA Obstruction Evaluation Office. They just don't look at the height of structures. They look at radio signals that could be emitted. They look at light pollution from a proposed development that could interfere with approach lighting or runway lighting. So if that has not been done yet, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered from that process. Generally, the FAA says it could take 45 days. In reality now, that could be a 6-month process based on delays at the FAA level. The airport, Indianapolis Executive, is an economic driver for this area. I think I quoted $435 million of economic input, just this single airport. If they were to lengthen their runway, it's not necessarily for more capacity, it's for safety reasons, based on the category of aircraft they're using the airport currently. We're not talking about airliners coming into Indianapolis Executive. We're talking about safety margins for existing aircraft and their ability to carry certain amounts of fuel off the airport. Mr. Sean White, if he would like to speak a little bit more in depth about the operation specific to the airport, I'm sure he'd be willing to do that. But from a national perspective, even a regional perspective, the FAA, they've said many times that residential use near or in the proximity of an airport is incompatible land use. And I think the planning process that plays out here should heavily take that into consideration. That's all I have, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Was there anybody else? We'll come back around. Go ahead.
Good evening, Tyson Clemmer, 11316 Still Creek Drive in Zionsville. Thanks to all of you on the Planning Commission for allowing thoughtful and meaningful discussion on this matter. I live in the Brookhaven neighborhood, south of the property under discussion. I can appreciate the concern of the current property owner to maximize their profit off the land they purchased as an investment when it was originally zoned agricultural. But as you've heard recently from many Zionsville residents living near the airport, safety and quality of life impact from air traffic are major concerns for those living in this area. Many guidance and planning documents, as discussed this evening, including those from the FAA and Indiana Code, note how residential neighborhoods are not compatible with air traffic and should not be placed near airports. This is most significant, obviously, near airport runways where the air traffic is most constant and lower to the ground. Residents within the Brookhaven, Fieldstone, And other neighborhoods near the airport have constructed homes with the required sound mitigations and were informed, as mentioned earlier, of the airport when purchasing their homes. But as you've also heard, this has not addressed the significant concerns of property owners in this area. Keep in mind, this is for properties that are over 2,000 feet further south of the airport runway than some of the homes in the proposed development. And even before the runway extension is complete, that will further lower the height of air traffic on arrivals and departures. There is, I think this is important to note, there is no other property within the town that will experience a greater impact from air traffic than the property under discussion this evening. When the property was originally rezoned from agriculture to R3 classification, the property was, as you well know, not within Zionsville town boundaries. Boone County made that decision along with many others that in hindsight we may disagree with. Whether the construction as noted of the existing Brookhaven and Fieldstone neighborhoods, again, which are further from the runway than the property in question, the location of the Union Elementary School, which is also a major concern of property owners in this area with the airport present, or allowing Hamilton County to purchase this airport. There are many decisions we may call into question. But also since the time of that rezoning decision, I think it is important to note that a number of things have also changed with the airport, namely the amount of air traffic at the airport, as well as the current active project to extend the existing runway. The threat of lawsuits should not prohibit Zionsville from making the most sound and appropriate decisions on land use around the airport. As clarified at a prior town council meeting by Councilman Traylor, the proposed rezoning is not an effort by the town to conspire with the airport. And as someone living close to the airport that has as many concerns as anyone and wish that the airport wasn't there and wish that the runway wasn't extended, that's happening. Rather, I believe that this petition for rezoning is a pragmatic response to the fact that the airport is going to be in its current location for the foreseeable future. The fact that the runway extension is happening and has already started, and that both of these factors have a significant impact on residents in this area. The decision around this property will frankly impact the safety and quality of life for residents in this area for generations to come. I want to thank the Plan Commission for your time and effort to make a thoughtful decision around this property. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Was there anybody else? You wanted to respond?
Chris Ferguson, Yasmin Stump Law Group. Just wanted to give a quick response to the presentation by Mr. Lewis. Having looked through the letter that he submitted to the Plan Commission, I believe it was July 16th, 2021, and also his comments. Put it succinctly, all I heard was airport growth, airport development. Everything that is being done in this rezoning is for the airport. Yet the airport has never tried to acquire the property itself. It is asking Zionsville to do it. It is asking Zionsville to deal with the legal consequences of it, which, as I've already said, could be quite costly. That's all.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments? Yep, come on up.
Hi, my name is David Heinzen, 11533 Wood Hollow Trail. And I live in the Brookhaven neighborhood as well. I'm a pilot for Southwest Airlines, and I enjoy flights and airplanes just like the rest of us, but they're very low to our home now. And with the extension to the south, it's just going to bring the noise and the planes lower to the ground. And right now we're about a mile south of the airport. And I can't imagine being at the end of the cul-de-sac in our neighborhood where they're even closer, and to suggest that there's going to be homes between the airport and our neighborhood. It's a safety concern. There's a 3-degree glide path, which means where I live, it's a mile south. And so the airplanes are about 300 feet high when they go over our house. And our homes are, 40, 50 feet tall. So it doesn't, on a good day, the margin of error is not great. And then throw in maybe some bad weather or God forbid, an inexperienced pilot, and then you've got another problem on your hands. I know that the runway extension is happening, but just for the safety's sake, and it doesn't take much digging around to find out other airports in the country. The residential area that's just adjacent to it, we're not talking about $500,000, $1 million homes. We're talking about lesser value homes that will possibly be adjacent to the homes that we have, and that will lower the value of our homes. So I know we talked about the property owner and the loss of money, but there's hundreds of people in Brookhaven, and they're gonna lose as well if that happens. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Chris Snyder, 14153 Ledgewood Way, Carmel, Indiana. I work for a company called Wolpert. We work as a representative for the Hamilton County Board at the Airport Authority. And I just got a chance to listen to a lot of what's being discussed, and I love how some intricacies are left out. As someone who's worked with the airport for quite a number of years, I've had an opportunity to see a lot of different things. And one of them is how the airport has worked and in harmony with its community over time. There's been a past where maybe that wasn't true, but I can tell you that in the last several years, that's been a big commitment of the Airport Authority, and it's been a big commitment of Zionsville. So I would like to remind people that there was a study that was actually undertaken by the airport and the Zionsville to find out what is the best compatible land use for its community. I want to be clear about that because there's statements here that are saying it's just about the airport. And a land use compatibility study is about what's best for its community and how to make the community thrive. That's for the people that live in their homes, that's for the people who do business, and it's for the people who utilize it for economic growth and development. And I would applaud both entities for the work that they did on that study. And that study started over a year ago. And I think it's really important to say that that takes time. Good planning matters. You need to make good decisions. And from that came recommendations of why we're here today. So to say that, oh, we haven't brought anything up or we haven't looked at it, well, there's no reason to buy land unless you have a good reason or it's validated. So I don't know how much you know about eminent domain, but you just can't enact eminent domain. That's not how it works. You have to have good purpose and need. And that's really important. And to be someone in the community that has that, that's important. So this study showed that this would be the best in use. So the agriculture would be the best use. And I agree with that, but I'm not the only one. Neither is the airport. You've heard from your community here that says the best use is agriculture. And this aligns with compatible land use development of the FAA's requirements. So as someone who's worked at over, oh geez, I don't know how many different airports in Indiana, probably 20 different airports in Indiana, who watch this happen every day for 20 years, I can tell you that agricultural is the best land use that you're going to have with this location. Anything else is going to be problematic, and that's what came out of the study. And that's what's recommended. And I can tell you what's coming up later in your agenda is not. And that goes along with guidance that we get from the FAA. And to imply that there was some information provided by Wolpert, you're absolutely right. Wolpert has worked in harmony with the community to make sure that different parties know the critical design elements of how to make key decisions. And we're good partners in that. So is the airport, to make sure that people have the facts that they need to make critical design decisions. And the same would go true for this planning commission. And I want you to know that that's the most important thing you can think about tonight is your community. That's it. Any further?
All right, thank
Thanks.
you. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on this matter? With that, I will open it up to members of the Plan Commission.
Got a question or I got a question?
Go for it.
I got a quick question. Says later we have a representative from Silverthorne Homes. Is somebody available from there?
Yes, sir. My name is Christian Rector. I'm the Vice President of Land Acquisition Entitlement for Silverthorne Homes.
Just in a round estimated number, what do you think the sale price of the homes in this subdivision will be?
That's a fantastic question. Given our supply chain issues and the variability of price right now, it's hard to project for when we actually begin to construct. But if we were building today and based on our current projections of development costs, we will easily be averaging well north of 400 and probably $500,000 for these homes.
What do you usually anticipate lot costs to be then?
Our pro forma shows our lot costs, not lot price, to be approximately $100,000 per lot.
How many homes again?
Our plat calls for, and I should have had this off the top of my head, 179. If you have anything else, I'm happy to answer it. I did plan on speaking for our primary plat, but I believe that that is a separate matter and evaluated under a different set of
That will be.
Yeah,
guidelines.
correct.
Yeah.
Just
Thank you.
So I guess my core concern is, one, this entitlement was done in 2006. So this property sat out there 14, 15 years without any real push to develop it. So while it was rezoned by the county to R3 from agricultural back then, there was a different group making those decisions. It wasn't really the town of Zionsville. Secondly, I'm going to assume the airport functioned differently in 2006 than what it's functioning now and what the anticipated functions of it could be. When they talk about airport cities, one of the things I always fall back on is that 95% of all the value of goods shipped are shipped via airplanes. And while this airport will never probably have larger commercial passenger planes or commercial shipping planes landing there, there is a lot of potential for smaller jets, smaller planes doing smaller deliveries and carrying higher and higher value product. Hence, when you talk about the airport cities, you're not really talking about residences. You're not, it's not an equal comparison to residents or people who may be living and working next to an airport that benefit from the access to that airport versus those people who live under the flight path. Mr. Berg was trying to point out how this is depriving the Cato family of the highest and best use. The problem is it's not a comparable property to anything when you look at what the existing burdens of the airport are and what the future of them could be. The other thing is the reason we're up here and kept up here by the town of Zionsville is to look after the long-term best interests of the town of Zionsville. And my belief is if this housing does go in there, my experience with housing has been it's usually an emotional purchase. And people will quickly overlook things if they think they're getting something of value or something that offsets or allows them to overlook the burden that they will be placed by being being in the flight path of an airline or an airport. And that once they start to kind of come to their senses about what they've purchased, the airport's protected from any kind of lawsuit. And so that lawsuit and those damages will be, they'll probably seek them from the town of Zionsville. Right now, we're looking at some agricultural land that is being used as agricultural land. We've got a person who's trying to promote that it's got a highest and best use, but I don't see it. I see it highest and best use as agricultural. And I see as our obligation to protect the town from future issues is it's better off to nip it now than when there's $400,000 and $500,000 homes on these properties.
Mr. Andriello, go ahead.
Ms. Jones, I appreciate your comments, always enlightening, and I'm sure that are heartfelt. But when we did this project back for the Catos 13 so years ago, we designed this project with the specific information that the airport extension, the runway extension was going to be done. So this project was located and zoned according to the fact that this was going to be extended. So it's not like somehow or another we're coming in now and it was rezoned back R3 and somehow or another the airport now is going to extend and that's causing problems. We worked with the airport and knew the extension was coming and we designed the project specifically as is. And I would respectfully disagree with your analysis that somehow or another this is an agricultural parcel. It is an agricultural parcel from its use right now, but it carries an R3 zoning classification, and you just simply can't dismiss that. That somehow or another that you can wave a magic wand and it's not an R3 classification. There's nothing that suggests that there's been any issues with regard to diminution of property values for the neighbors to our south by virtue of the fact that the airport's there. So it's not causing any problems or difficulties from a property value standpoint from them. These are going to be very nice homes, very nicely priced homes. They're going to be clustered. And more importantly, none of the homes are going to be in the airport protection zone, which is the key area from flyover standpoint. As far as some of the other concerns that perhaps were raised, there's also an issue called the Tall Structures Act in Indiana. And when Mr. Howard suggests that there's somehow going to be commercial potential there, those commercial buildings are generally much taller than the residential structures. And if they're up in that potential ag area or other areas, they're going to fall under the Tall Structures Act and won't be able to be built. These are going to be the types of homes that will be able to be compatible with the Tall Structures Act, given where they're going to be located. So there just simply isn't any issue with regard to hazards and this, that, and the other. Naturally, if you're a pilot and naturally, if you're the airport, you'd like to have no residential development for miles on either side of your landing strips. That's understandable. That's the argument that they're making, but it just simply doesn't hold water that somehow you can disregard an R3 classification that's already in existence that worked that up back when we understood what the airport was going to do with regard to their extension. So hopefully I've addressed that, but I do appreciate the comments.
Mr. Andreoli, Mr. Mike. At the time, back in 2006 or 7, when this was first heard, was there significant opposition from the airport authority at that time?
There was not. They could not go on record. And I suspect what's going on here. And I certainly appreciate, I respect Mike Howard. He's one of my closest friends in the practice of law and an excellent attorney, an excellent county attorney, one of the best in the state of Indiana, quite frankly. And as a practical matter, there was no opposition. They couldn't go on record saying that they wanted it. They can't go on record saying they want any residential development, period, as far as the FAA is concerned. And that may be a little of what's going on now. They have to protect their vested interest by at least objecting and trying to put forth what they can to prevent residential development as far as the FAA is concerned. But there was no opposition to this whatsoever. Nobody appeared at a meeting in opposition to it. The only opposition we got, I think it's a fair question, was to the commercial. We got pushback from some of the residents there with regard to our initial proposal to maybe zone it commercial. And we got substantial pushback from those. So we looked at whether there was a way that we could develop part of the ground in a residential, maintaining the rest of it in open space and ag area that could not be developed. That was clearly within the runway protection zone that should not allow residential development. And that's how we laid it out, and that's how we did it. And the applicant tonight has made their petition in conformance with that particular proposal, rezoning proposal, and the commitments that were attached there too. So hopefully I've answered that question.
So in the letter from Mr. Fry, President of the Hamilton County Airport Authority, he references a couple, I guess, people nosing around to see if there was going to be some development on the property in 2020, it looks like, or 20. Lennar looked at this, and then we've got 2020 Silverthorne Homes came up. So which came first? You know, I mean, did you guys file before this was put forward to for the rezone request? What came first of those two items?
In terms of what? The first request we made was for commercial rezoning. Then we went to.
No, I'm talking about the primary plat that we've got before us tonight. Was that filed prior to the request for a rezone?
No, but more importantly, it was filed before the rezone is done, and the applicant is entitled, and you have to ask your counsel about this. The applicant tonight is entitled to rely on the zoning classification, and he has. Not only that, we went to the airport authority. Lennar first looked at this, and then they were doing another project, decided not to do it because of the sewer issue. Arbor Homes and Silverthorne were able to work that issue out with regard to sewers. But we went to the airport authority, a year and a half ago or so, and let them know what our plans were and let them know we were going forward with that, and got input from them at that particular point in time. So all of that was done in conjunction with understanding that they were going to extend their runway. So the applicant that has filed for a primary plat approval that was recommended by staff as being in compliance with your zoning ordinance, they filed before there is a designated zoning classification on this land that's any different than the R3 classification. They have vested rights, we believe. We believe the Catos have vested rights because they not only went ahead and rezoned this, but they paid the sum of $25,000 to the county. We've made those receipts and provided those to you. So they've actually incurred costs as well as required. And so in answer to the question, the applicant is in full compliance with the law in terms of moving forward with their primary plat, in my opinion. It's my opinion. You have counsel, you can rely on counsel, but we would respectfully suggest that that's the law. Thanks.
So I have a question for you before you sit down, Mr. Andreoli. Brookhaven, do you roughly know when that neighborhood went through its initial purchase for residential and replatting?
The Dries project?
Yes.
Yes, I was tangentially involved in that because they came to me with regard to what kind of information had to be put in the covenants.
So roughly when was that? When that process started, roughly what time frame was that?
I don't know whether Brookhaven was actually started at that time.
I mean, it was pre-2010 because we moved to Zionsville in 2010 and there were houses there already. What I'm getting at is, and I agree with, to some degree with Larry's comment of, it was sitting there for 14 years, but it kind of wasn't sitting there for 14 years because you had Brookhaven that I think roughly around the same time was developing that subdivision. And you wouldn't really had the genesis to do residential north of Brookhaven until Brookhaven took off and those homes sold. And then, another home builder might come in and say, well, okay, that did well. Let's move north. So while, yes, there was 14 years there, I think there was a natural growth to the north over those 14 years to get to that point, was where I was going with that.
I think that's a fair comment. I think Brookhaven started, but I think the way they developed Brookhaven, they started from County Road 300 and then they moved north.
Yeah.
But the whole development had been primary platted, and then they just moved north as the demand took over. This project could have come in a lot earlier had the issue with the sewers been worked out.
Yeah.
There was always demand for the product, and several people had looked at it. The real question is, you're not dealing with Zionsville utilities, you're dealing with another utility, and there was always some issues and some challenges with regard to that. But Arbor Homes and Silverthorne were able to work through those and figure that out, to their credit, because I know others have looked at it and weren't able to actually do it. And at one point, Lennar had all of that land option, not only ours, but all of it to 421, and decided that that wasn't going to work, and they wanted to wait until after the master plan was done.
Yeah.
Airport master plan, to see whether or not that was going to be problematic or difficult with regard to the other properties, because they would have to be rezoned.
I think the challenge we're having is trying to make the decision of between what is legally right and what we think is right. As an architect, I think residential is horrible for that property. Everybody's going to hate it. You cannot soundproof that house enough. I've seen the extra insulation you're going to put in. That does not reduce the noise. RC channel, extra layers of drywall reduce the noise, not the insulation. I think it's a horrible use. But it's whether or not you have the right to put that use there. And that's what we're discussing, I feel like, tonight.
And I understand completely, and I understand the tugs and pulls that you have to wade through with regard to this. I would only suggest that given the clear import of the law in this area, that it may be well served to go what's legally correct, even if your heart may be otherwise. But that's certainly, I have a client to represent, and that's our position, so we're putting that forward. But thank you.
Would you like to comment? We got someone in the back of the room there.
It's time to hit the real issues in this case. We agree that property is now zoned R3. The question is, were there commitments made that induced the county commissioners to zone it R3? In your packet, you have a document called material representations, not minor, material representations and commitments to induce zone map change. These documents were put before the county commissioners as part of this issue. And the real issue here is, who wants to be the person who tells people that they have made their largest investment in their life, they are ready to move into their dream home, and there's airplanes flying over their house? The material commitments that are contained here, and I'll go through them in a minute, were put in there to enhance the probability that new homeowners in this area would have notice that there was an airport there. And I kind of jokingly in a memo, but I think it's true, that if you do these things, all you do is increase the probability that people are going to know that their life savings is put into a house with airplanes flying over. The best thing to do would, if you approve this, give us a sign permit to put on our property facing south. There is a public use airport here, and you're going to have airplanes flying over your house. That would be a fair way to do it. But let's look at what these comments and representations were made to the county commissioners. One, they would want to put the owners on notice that there's been established an airport zone, that the airport zone allows the operators to conduct airport activities, including building and maintenance, hangars, taking off, landing, planes is permitted in the zone. Classification, subject to any reasonable restrictions, the airport is allowed as a matter of right to own, operate, conduct its business as defined in the AZ airport zone area. They would put them on notice that they may experience significant levels of airport operations in the permittee, and further, that the airport could not be deemed a public nuisance. And guess how the property owners would be put on better notice of this? Section 2, the following language, the language that I just read to you, will be included in both the recorded plat and in the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the subdivision. I've read the covenants for this subdivision. I've read the plats for this subdivision. This petitioner did not use the word airport once. And these were the things that the Cato family agreed to put, make sure that they were there. It was recorded. It was in the chain of title. So they haven't complied with, they may have complied with your rules, but the Cato family hasn't complied with the rules that they imposed upon themselves in order to get this zoned as an A3 use.
Which pertains to the next docket item, not this one. Which pertains to the next docket
Yes.
item, not this one.
But the next docket question will be, are they entitled to plat being approved as a matter of right? And as far as communicating with this developer, we had a Zoom call back in October. They wanted to continue to talk about things. We talked about things like detention ponds produce geese and they don't work well with fan jets. And they said they'd get back to us. And since that time and until this was filed, crickets. That's all we heard. Crickets. So you're right. It is the next issue, but I could not allow us to say, stand up. We've done everything we're supposed to do as a matter of right. So we get to enjoy R3 zoning today.
Why did the airport authority not stand up against this when it was zoned this way?
At the time, we were willing to take a risk that people would be on better notice of this use if they followed these covenants. I mean, Mike Andreoli's a friend of mine. He's a smart lawyer. He didn't put these restrictions on his client's property if he didn't think he had to do that to induce change in zone map. In fact, it's in his title. Sorry.
No, we may not have been here today if you guys, yeah, we may not have been here today though, if the airport authority would have stepped up, in 2013 or whenever it was and voiced their opinion then. And you, to your point, you took the risk. Risk didn't pay off.
Well, took the risk that there would be better disclosure, and there's been absolutely no effort by this petitioner to comply with these restrictions. Thank you.
Chris Snyder. I did want to point out, I think a critical factor in this between the 2006 time and the time today. The airport authority uses guidance from the FAA and NDOT to make decisions. And I can tell you that between that time, there have been significant changes to the FAA, what they call their design standards or advisory circulars, and programmatic guidance that comes out from them, especially for land use compatibility. And those things do change, and airports do get new guidance, and it's the airport's due diligence to certainly work with their community to make good decisions, even if that means to go back and take care of things and improve their situation for its community. So I just really want to make sure that those are critical elements to be considered. And Mr. Andreoli didn't say that we didn't take, the airport authority didn't take one position or another. The airport authority can certainly take a position for and against. To Mike Howard's comments that it was December 2020 that we had requested. We had not actually seen a final plan, but I do want to point out the initial plan that we saw in 2020 that was presented by the property development had significant issues. And again, being a good partner in the community, we worked very hard to get through those, but we never saw a final plan until this commission hearing. So just want to make sure everybody has those details. Thank you.
The information that was generated back in 2006 was the information that we simply used to go ahead and come up with our list of commitments. I'm not smart enough to come up with these list of commitments. These were taken from the noise sensitive ordinance that's a state ordinance that requires certain things to be done if you're in a noise sensitive area. That's where I got most of this stuff, from the state statutory language. I'm not well versed in the airport language, and I can't suggest that we got this particular language from the airport itself. We were pointed to the noise sensitive statutes, and that, if not all of that, most of that's contained in the noise sensitive statutes that you have to comply with if you're in the quote noise sensitive areas. And these areas are including Brookhaven and the adjacent development, and even Sanders to the south, given where it is. The very top of that development has commitments and those types of commitments with regard to all of the information that contained therein. And quite frankly, if it's good enough for the statute, why isn't it good enough for the Indianapolis Executive Airport? I mean, if that's what you have to do by statute, why isn't that good enough for them? They're suggesting it's not working, but we had no knowledge that it wasn't working. We had no knowledge that it wasn't working when we committed to Arbor Homes. We had no knowledge that it wasn't working when we met with them in a public meeting. So my suggestion to you is that if it's contained in the noise sensitive area, why should anybody have to do more if the state statutory language says you have to do this and we've complied with that? This may even go further than those types of things, but I would suggest if you ask Mr. Rector, all of the things that would be included in these particular commitments have to be included in his covenants, conditions, and restrictions. They're included in the Dries project. They're included in Sanders. They should be included in this one as well. I would concur with that. Thank you.
What about the comment that the notices that were required in the material? What about the comment that the notices of airport are not in the covenants? The required notices in the material.
He'll have to respond to that. I know they're familiar with that. And they were going to have to put those in after we had our discussion. We looked at those. So you can respond.
So commitment 2 that was read to you states the following language will be included in both the recorded plat and the declaration, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So it will be on the recorded plat, not the primary. That is what we're here to discuss tonight. The DCCRs that were submitted tonight are our standard blank DCCRs, and they're not set up specifically for this property. It's very rare that you go through those at a primary plat. But he's correct, the airport is not mentioned on the primary plat because that is not the recorded document that will be followed when the title company pulls title and puts those restrictions on your title document for your house. The one other commitment that was not read was the first one that says the following language will be included in a separately executed addendum to the purchase agreement for the initial sale and each subsequent sale of each lot in the subdivision, aircraft operations. Don't need to read the whole thing about noise there, but I did also want to add that commitment was skipped over, that there will have to be a separately executed addendum to the sale of each home and in each successive sale, putting the buyer on notice of the airport. That can't be buried within the purchase agreement. It has to be a separately executed addendum. It was mentioned earlier, the reason I was going to get up earlier for the purposes of this discussion, not our primary plat, was the question about what was filed first. I honestly can't tell you on the exact filing date, but we have been working on this since October. We did meet with the airport. I believe the words that were used on our first draft was, this is the worst plan next to an airport we've ever seen. They will admit we've made significant discussions with them since. I believe we met with them once a second time, got farther feedback. At that point, we had to move forward. So, but regardless of which one was filed first, they were within a matter of days. We had been working on this well before the April 19th city council hearing, which is where the direction for the rezone came from. So thank you.
Mr. Androli again. So I'm not going to ask Dan this, but your contention is that because this primary plat was filed in advance of the rezone, that's going to take precedent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Wayne, if I can get some clarification on the petition that was submitted for the rezone, it is marked received 4/23/2021 at 4:39 a.m. On the basically the cover sheet there. There is no marking as such on the next petition. So how do we know when that was received?
Let me be clear for the record. The applicant and the Cato family is they are entirely able to rely on the zoning classification that exists on this property when they file their application.
I get that.
Okay.
I get that. I'm just asking for clarification because one is marked as when it was received, the other one is not.
Oh.
And I just wanted to know if Wayne knew, because the signature dates for the notaries are the 16th of April on yours versus the 23rd of April on the town's request, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's when that was submitted. So I was just asking for clarification.
I've not represented Arbor Homes.
Yeah, so that's why I asked Wayne.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not represented Arbor Homes officially in this, Mr. Lake. We're trying to help as best we can. We have a client who wants to sell their ground, but
I just, if Wayne can.
But I think based upon the information, the filing dates are not critical to this matter because when they filed under the R3 designation.
Exactly.
The rezone, when it occurs, it's going to be after that.
Okay.
So
it's irrelevant when they submit it. It's.
Yeah, Mr. Andreoli is asserting what I call a section 1109 right. And that says that when you file a completed submission, you get the law that existed on that date. And Mr. Andreoli's point earlier was that we don't know when, if you recommend this rezone that's pending before you, and it is ultimately adopted by the town council, we don't know when. All we do know is that it's later than today. And if Mr. Andreoli is correct, and there is a section 1109 right, then that came into being in April. And that, if he can carry the day on that argument, the only date that really matters is that we all know that it was filed before today, and the rezone is not going to be today.
So we can approve, this is theoretical, we can approve a rezone because we
only recommend.
Well, yes,
one way or the other.
yes. That.
Yeah, there are a lot of lawyers in the room. Let's get these words right.
I recommend a rezone. given that we may not feel residential is the best use there, and we want to look towards this comprehensive plan that we discussed last night. But that would not prohibit Mike and his client from pursuing his separate petition because he is doing that under the rezone that was there at the time. Would that result automatically in a lawsuit, or would he just be able to continue down his path because he was first in the queue, if you will?
We've had a lot of threats of lawsuits, so I'm not going to answer that question because I think we're the ones getting sued. But here's the way I would answer that is that Mr. Andreoli's assertion of an 1109 right, if he's right, then yeah, he doesn't, I don't know that he cares much of what you do tonight on this rezone, because if he has it already. And then that gives his client certain rights for everything that comes later in the development process. So if he can fit into that entitlement, then I don't know that that really affects him. But I would say this, that I also think that there are risks in down zoning property. So you shouldn't do it just because. And as you know from the staff report, there are 5 criteria that you need to look at. But and we've had some of this hearing, some of the next one already, and so we've heard a little of this. But I just think that you have to be cautious given where we find ourselves, and that is that there is at least an arguable vested interest here under state law, which is the 1109. And then Mr. Andreoli will also, or Mr. Ferguson, one of them, and I feel like we're in the trial now, but someone is also going to raise inverse condemnation arguments under federal takings law, which is a little different. And that's why you've heard them talk about the fact that under federal takings law, somebody has to have spent money. And that's why Mr. Andreoli talked about the fact that the Cato family had to make a contribution to the highway department, that they've expended money along the way. Arbor Homes has expended money. And so that doesn't really go to the 1109 argument. That goes to a federal taking. So my word of advice to you is that there is such a thing as a vested property right. It's defined by Indiana law. You can't give it to anyone, and as the Plan Commission, you can't give it or take it away. Okay, you don't rezone property, you recommend, and you also don't grant permits. Okay, so if that entitlement exists, it exists already. I would exercise great caution. I would make sure about your recommendation, even though the final decision about that lies with the town council. And so you're just a recommending body, so there's a little bit of weight off you here. But I think whenever the kinds of arguments that have been raised here, the airport has raised serious concerns about public safety and air safety for pilots and for people in the community, and you have people raising a property interest, which is also an important interest. You should be very cautious in whatever you do next.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Sure.
I have a modest suggestion, and it may be that maybe it makes sense and it may not make sense to you or legally or otherwise, and I may be talking against my client's own best interest, but maybe it makes sense to continue or table the issue with regard to the rezone. Let's see if the development occurs. If the development does not occur or goes away by the wayside, or it's withdrawn because they can't move forward, then you may be in a position to move forward, at least on one end of things, not with regard to a ministerial plat issue. But again, that's perhaps something for another day or another discussion. But it seemed to me that, especially given the ministerial nature of the plat, if that gets approved and they develop, then it's all moot. If they don't develop, then we're kind of back to square one, and maybe things can be revisited at another date, free from the burden of having a plat request being filed, and you have to deal with that at the same time. Just a thought, but again, my client may not like me saying that, but as a practical matter, that seems like something that you might consider or might not. Thank you.
President, members of the Planning Commission, do want to offer there was comment about the staff report and how it touched upon cluster subdivisions. And certainly that is mentioned in the staff report again, back to the narrowness of the topic of conversation, is that staff certainly did not want, as a part of this process, to give the false impression that a rezoning to agricultural would eliminate the probability of a subdivision. Your zone zoning ordinance facilitates something called a cluster subdivision. Hence, that's why that language is in the staff report. So I'm going to provide that clarification for you. As to other items that have been discussed this evening, certainly Mr. Andreoli's idea is something to consider. Certainly may want to consult with your legal counsel here. I mean, this is unique in that you have your town council requiring you to have this hearing. And so to then continue it for an undefined period of time to let the ministerial process work its way down through the chain of discussions may not be looking to meet the objective of the town council. Certainly the town council, this process, as attorneys are practicing in this room tonight, know who have represented petitions in front of the town council. This hearing tonight, as all hearings go, is the first hearing in a rezoning process. The town council has no obligation to take further comment or any comment. So this tonight is the moment where there is conversation. Certainly the town council has the ability to take 3-minute comment, adjust its rules, but we're not here tonight to make decisions for the town council on how they operate their processes. This action tonight is the first hearing in a multiple step process with the rezoning. So I want to provide that clarification for you. And certainly, again, staff's recommendation is based upon, as indicated tonight, the 2-year effort to review this area. The compatibility is of concern for the staff, hence the recommendation and support of the plan as it's been put together. But certainly the discussion this evening is all very germane in terms of timing and investor rights. Oh, and to answer the question, May 10th is when the plat petition check was cut, the 9th. We have a date stamped as the 10th, the one that appears electronically in the file. Certainly.
So I'm just going to ask to continue it indefinitely. That's completely in our discretion. No. I want to understand what the request, what his suggestion was and what that means.
I think his suggestion is to continue and make a decision on the plat, and then that might negate the need to make a decision on the rezone. I don't agree with that. I mean, I think that the town council has asked you for a recommendation. You should give them whatever recommendation it is you believe you want to make. You don't make any decisions on the rezone. That keeps that process moving. And when you get finished voting on what your recommendation would be, then you'll consider the next case, which just happens to be that preliminary plat, and you'll then shift gears and move out of the legislative recommending mode and move into your direct activities, finding whether that plat meets your ordinances. And I think that just as the petitioner, the next case has rights to be heard and be a part of your process. The town council, just because they're the petitioner, they have the right to be heard too.
Okay. I just wanted to understand what the suggestion.
Yeah. And I don't think the two are inexorably linked in the way that one might think. I think that, but I mean, I just think that you should just make your recommendation and let the town council do whatever comes next. They're not bound by what you do anyway. They can make their own decisions.
Is there any further comments, questions for anybody?
Wayne, are you representing just the staff or also the petitioner this evening?
Staff is here tonight representing staff.
Okay, the only reason I ask is we really haven't heard from the petitioner in this case.
I don't think we've really, in the past on rezone, we've heard anything,
No, I'm just,
any discussion or any comments from the town council on that, those matters, so.
Yeah, but this is different. The town
interesting.
council is petitioner.
yeah,
Well,
it's interesting.
they
that they-
instruct us all, they technically instruct us. If you want to come forward, please.
Interesting that it's,
Brian Trailer, 10319 East 100 North. No, I have nothing additional to offer that hasn't already been said, but to answer your question, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I was the one to make this recommendation. It's strictly based on a common sense approach. I have no vested interest in the airport. I have no vested interest in this property. I don't know the petitioners, have nothing against them making some money. My issue is one of a community well-being. I don't feel like the best interest of the community is to have a neighborhood at this property. Seeing the friction that has already been put in place with Fieldstone, Brookhaven, we have a proven track record of this. And I would say friction is the worst word. It's not awful, but you move further north and the airport moves further south, which we can't control, it's going to be worse exponentially.
Thanks.
And I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I'm not avoiding anything.
no, I appreciate that. It's just rare to not have a petitioner speak on their own behalf.
I don't believe in my 6 years on the town council, we have ever done this.
Yeah.
So I'm new to it too.
And I've only been on planning commission for what, 6 months. So.
Right.
All right. We have another person standing up. Do you want to speak to? Sure. I just want to make a notice that Cindy Madrick is on the Zoom call and has been participating by phone. So she is on the attending the meeting virtually.
My name is Jim Metzler. I'm not a lawyer. I won't sue. I just happen to be, the petition here address is 11281 East 200 South. I'm 11280 East 200 South. I'm across the street. So I can't imagine that this plan is going to impact anyone more than it's going to impact me. I have to say, when I listen to the different comments and things back and forth, I've been there since 1989, so I was there before the executive airport. And we talk about noise and we talk about those kinds of things. I was out there when it was gliders, and we would go out with our baseball team and we would watch the gliders come in. So that's the kind of noise I like. You know, obviously that was overruled and the airport was sold. I'm more concerned about, we talk about all the rules and if everybody does what they're supposed to, everything's fine. They don't. They don't. The folks who are flying the planes, there's not a day go by that someone doesn't Zoom my house. They take the shortcuts. They take the shortcuts. Talking about the housing addition across, the speed limit of the road is the 10, 15, 20, 30 miles an hour is the average speed for those people. I'm sad, and I get it, it's the real world. But it seems like all we talk about is money and the people that's what money's going to be made and what money's not going to be made. And what about the children? What about the safety? What about the folks in the community? I don't know if you know it or not, but that is a bike path. And that is a haven for a bike path. It won't be. You add 179 more homes across the street and the traffic and the, you know, the things that go on there, it won't be It won't be the same. And maybe it's progress, okay? I guess I'm confessing I'm getting old. But I'm sad because we're not talking about kids. We're not talking about safety. We're talking about dollars. And it is not a good use. Agriculture is a good use for that property. This is a money grab in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this point in time, I'm going to close the public hearing, and then let's talk up here on how do we want to proceed on this matter. We really have three directions: favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. So I'm open for suggestions. The vote may determine which way to go anyway, but I see both sides of the fence on this thing. I get it. However, I think the issue that I see is the fact that, you know, they filed with R3, and then the fact is they're requesting a down zone post that. And it's, you know, it's, to me, that's not correct. I mean, it's by law, it's not correct. So
I'm with you in that I don't support the use, but I agree with the right to the use.
100% agree.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't think I'd want to live there, but I'm not saying somebody doesn't have the right to try to do it. It's a mess. I don't think it ever should have been R3 to begin with, in my opinion. It probably should have been something else.
Oh, you know, I buy law by the bushel basket anymore. So it's, you know, it really comes down to the other side of the coin is that does the Cato family and their representative feel they really can go and recover some sort of value for this by saying it's being deprived of their highest and best use? The family in requesting the rezoning from the county made a series of agreements that the airport has the right to be the airport, which relieves the airport responsibility, and it also resolves the issue that I had with Zionsville being put on the hot plate. You know, there's a known issue out there. This was all done 14 years ago, and I think applying a little common sense, airport use has become more intensive. So there's going to be more of an impact than even what the people who agreed to these commitments 14 years ago could have anticipated. So if we pass along a recommendation to the town council that we should go ahead with the down zone, then it's the town council's choice whether or not they expose the town to a lawsuit over it. But you know, yeah, there's probably going to be some blood on the sidewalk, but the petitioner, you know, they have their own burden to actually prove that they're being deprived. We could make the statement, we're helping them with the best business decision they could make, because the cost to develop these lots is going to be X. You can't do it for a half or a third because it's close to the airport. And like everybody says, the housing prices are also going to be only X because of the existence of the airport. We have done our due diligence on one hand on making sure everybody's going to be put on notice on it. And if we just take it one step farther and approve the down zone, then it's everybody else's job to figure out how they want to do it. Town council doesn't have to listen to us.
I understand. Back when they got this in 2007 or 6, obviously the airport extension was planned. At that time, I think with an extension being built, I think it's easy to state that we anticipate the traffic's going to be heavier. So, I realize it was Boone County that passed this or gave them the zoning, but at that point in time, if Mr. Andreoli's, telling the truth, which I believe he is, there was no objection. And then now, 15 years later, there's an objection. And there's a subdivision, to be first, the one south are probably more in the direct flight path than what this one's gonna be. So, yesterday you weren't here, but we had the airport plan, and they talk about residential in different forms right adjacent to the flight paths. And they say, well, it's different. It's apartments. And, so it's, it go, they're talking about both sides.
Yeah, and I read through that report, even though I was missing in action. But the gist of that is that residential, that commercial, all those businesses will have a direct benefit to that access to the airport. The people moving into these homes are going to have no direct access to this airport. It's not like, a pilot would live next door to, if a pilot could get out and walk over to his plane, that's justifiable. And then he's going to know the risk of being near the airport. People living in these houses aren't going to hop out.
Well, we have a pilot right out here that lives in those neighborhoods, so I
Well,
think you're wrong, Larry.
Well, but yeah, I'm sorry. All right.
Southwest is going in and out of that airport. We got big problems.
So as it stands right now, that airport.
Well, no, we've already closed the public hearing, so no more comments.
I think where he was going was the airport runway will support bigger planes anyway, which we heard last night. It's a weight thing, not a distance thing.
All right. So how do you guys want to proceed?
Sure, I'll make a motion.
Let's get it rolling.
I move the docket 2021-21-Z to rezone 160 plus or minus acres from the R3 Rural Residential District as modified by interest number 2007000001388 to the Agricultural AG District, receive a favorable recommendation based on the findings in the staff report as presented, subject to the execution of a written zoning commitment prohibiting cluster subdivisions on the subject property, with the recommendation being certified to the town council for adoption or rejection.
All right, so we have a motion for a favorable recommendation. Is there a second to that?
Do we have anything from Cindy?
Cindy, are you online?
We're gonna need her up as we vote anyway, so.
Yeah. So there's a second, is there a second for the favorable?
How about you got Cindy second it?
What's
Not
that?
unless Cindy's gonna second it. She's not gonna second it online, is she?
I don't know. Is Cindy, can you hear us?
Can you
There we
can you
go.
hear me?
We can
Sorry.
now.
Okay.
So are you interested in seconding the favorable recommendation?
Yes, I am.
All right, so we have a second. So any further discussion before we take a roll call vote? Let's say, okay, so an aye will be for a favorable recommendation, and a nay will be for a
Just be against the motion.
against the motion. So, all right, Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly. Mrs. Grabanowski,
Nay.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Nay.
Mr. Lake,
Nay.
Mr. Fedor,
Nay.
Mrs. Madrick,
Aye.
Mr. France.
Nay. All right, That motion is defeated 5-2. So would anybody else like to make another motion on this matter?
Let's see. I move that docket 2021-21-Z to rezone 160 acres from R3 rural residential as modified by instrument number 2007-00001388 to agricultural district receive an unfavorable recommendation based upon the findings in the staff report as presented, with recommendations being certified to town council for adoption or rejection.
I would note that the staff report is supportive of the filing, so certainly your motion may want to.
I'm sorry.
Fedor's motion may want to.
Yeah, with the
Speak to that.
removal of the statement on the staff report. Is that sufficient?
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly. Mr. Jones,
Nay.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Mrs. Madder,
Nay.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-2, so we will forward this to the town council with a negative recommendation, unfavorable recommendation. All right, next item on the docket. I got a lot of the same people here on this one.
Hey, wait a minute. It's a,
Unfavorable.
all right. You
I said negative and then I corrected the unfavorable.
no, well, all right.
I said negative
We're
recommendation,
fine.
then I corrected the unfavorable, so it's unfavorable.
All right.
So, all right, next on the docket is 2021-21 PP Union Woodlands, 11281 East 200 South. Petition for primary plat approval to provide for 179 lots in the rural R3 residential zoning district. Petitioner present, please state your name, address, and begin.
My name is Christian Rector, Vice President of Land Acquisition and Entitlement for Silverthorne Homes, 9225 Harrison Park Court, Indianapolis, Indiana. Have a presentation, I'll admit, after all the discussion. I'm not sure if it's necessary or if even I can get the HDMI cable to plug in here. Yeah, done this a lot of times. I've never done it immediately after a petition on the same piece of property. So I'll be brief in my overview here. As it's already been mentioned, we are Silverthorne Homes petitioning for primary plat approval of 179 lots for the Union Woodlands subdivision. We are Silverthorne Homes. We've been referred to as Arbor Homes a few times here tonight. We are the same company. However, Silverthorne is what has traditionally been called a move-up product. I would argue in today's pricing world, Arbor is quickly becoming a move-up product, and Silverthorne is beyond that. Our company has been in existence and managed here locally since 1994, and in 2018, we had the opportunity to join the Berkshire Hathaway family of companies. This is the piece of property we've been discussing this entire time. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that everything we've discussed here tonight is of a concern. We'd be not doing our due diligence if we did not go out to the property, listen to the plans. I mentioned the cost that is not insignificant of developing this property. These are not what is traditionally be called entry-level housing. These are substantially priced homes. And we have a duty to do our due diligence and making sure we believe that there is a market for that before we make the substantial investment to develop this property. Our core values, family, opportunity, our customers are all 5 of our tenants. We don't take the safety conversations lightly. However, safety is a tough subject to discuss. Around 400 kids a year die in residential pools. Every single one of those is terrible. There are laws about fences and pool covers to try to prevent that. But I'd be willing to bet several people in this room have a residential pool. It is a risk that we make. And as has been discussed, there are commitments on this piece of ground. We'll have to disclose the airport to our customers. It gives me even further confidence knowing that a pilot is comfortable living in the neighborhood immediately south of it. As the staff report says, we are in compliance with zoning. The R3, we believe actually, despite all this discussion, that parcel to the north is already zoned agricultural, and any other designation was an error when the reorganization was done. The commitments on the property state that northern parcel remains ag, and that 35 acres be dedicated to the town for park space. You can see the rest of our statistics there. The 179 grosses out at 1.1 density across the entire parcel. I believe we are just under 2 when you subtract the space that we are dedicating to the town. Here's some pictures of our homes. We have 12 floor plans, each with a substantial number of elevations to provide a variety throughout the community. As has been discussed, we have a positive recommendation from staff. Primary plat is ministerial in nature. We are in compliance with the zoning. If we need to make an additional commitment with the approval of the plat, that we will absolutely comply with all of the zoning commitments that run with the property, the notification to the buyers and the addendum, the DCCRs, including the language noticing it, as well as what the language on the secondary recorded plat, and the fact that the buyers are noticed that it's not a nuisance. We're happy to belt and suspenders that, so that is also a condition of the primary plat approval, just so that everybody is certain of it. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I feel like we've discussed this at length already.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, is there anybody in the public who'd like to comment on this matter?
Again, Mike Howard, attorney for the Airport Authority, 694 Logan Street, Noblesville, Indiana. I would like the record for this petition to incorporate my prior comments. And I would suggest that even though this plat may meet the rules of your subdivision ordinance, it doesn't meet the rules that were in place when these people entered into a contract to purchase the property. And we've got a petition here that's several hundred pages, and it was in their title work that they would make the disclosures that Mike Andreoli made to the county commissioners to induce them to get the R3. And I know about the Dosman case, and I know about the fact that if it is zoned that way and they meet the plat requirements, but there were rules for this property that were voluntarily in place the day they filed this. And with all due respect to when you have such a detailed list of things you must do, not to include them in these 100 or so pages, and let people know that we are going to comply with all the rules. They have not complied with the rules in the plat. And I respectfully suggest that we forgot and it was preliminary and it's not a big deal, and go ahead and make it a condition of the plat approval. This petition is before you as submitted, and it is incomplete. We ask you to deny the plat as submitted. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else?
My name is Tom Chope. I live at 11050 East 200 South, right down the road from Mr. Metzler. Pretty close to the end of the runway too. We are very concerned about two issues. One of them we've almost beaten to death, but I'm going to cover it anyway. But firstly, something that hasn't been mentioned, that we are very concerned about vehicular congestion. And I don't know whether that's been covered with anything before. I know it was mentioned the previous meeting. You've got something there. Okay. The thing that concerns us is 179 houses on 161 acres. And that the houses will be built on about 52% of the land that they've apparently purchased or would like to purchase. Concern is 179 houses boils down to 716 vehicles trying to get out of that subdivision and back into that subdivision every day through County Road 200 South, which is a county rural country road, 2-lane, and it's not capable of handling that kind of traffic. Secondly, majority of those 716 vehicles is going to have to get out onto 421. And there is nothing there, or I've heard of nothing being planned to make that a intersection that's going to be able to handle 716 vehicles going through it. Some of the vehicles could filter going east to the Boone County, Hamilton County line road, but that road, which is in my vernacular, 1200 east, is even narrower than 200 south, the road that I live on. And if you got two dump trucks coming at one another, both of them have got put wheels on the shoulder in order to get by. None of that takes into account the damage and the disruption that all the construction traffic is going to do to a country road. That just, by the way, was just recently repaved within about the last 2 months. 2 weeks. Well, yeah, they just painted the stripes on it today. We've got enough triaxle dump trucks, and I've been in the dump truck business, and I worked for Allison Transmission for 46 years, so I know a little bit about trucks. A few years back, the Pittman organization tried to build an apartment complex across the street from us. And the residents rebelled against that because of congestion. And either they withdrew the offer or what, I don't know, but the issue died. So I'm now concerned about trying to get out of my house, get onto the road. Once I'm get on the road, to get onto either 421 or 1200 to go someplace. Now, I'm retired, been retired for 15 years, but I still like to go places, and I think you do. So we request that this plat where 179 homes on 161 acres be denied. Secondly, the subject that we just ended up talking about, I'm really concerned about the safety and the noise issue, like it has been brought up. And I'm just I'd bring it up again. Everybody said everything that I was going to say, and especially that gentleman over there talking about being able to have the planes go over his house at 150 feet. You can see the people's faces in the planes as they're landing. I don't think that's good. Now, they don't go right over my house, but they don't go very far from my house. And I will go back to, since we all like to go back to 2006 or 2005, a letter from the Hamilton County Airport Authority recommending that Union Elementary School not be built there because of the noise, the danger, the pollution. There's 40,000 operations, and I presume an operation out of that airport means that a takeoff or landing was 40,000 of them in 2018. And I don't know about 2019 or 2020. The figures that I got were on the NDOT database. Do we really think this is a good place to build a neighborhood, especially of $400,000 homes? I don't think so. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
Evening, Emily Emerson. I live at 2486 Still Creek Drive. I'm also a Brookhaven resident in Zionsville. I would just like to reiterate, I think, a lot of the concerns that my neighbors have stated about well, the expansion, which we know is happening. I have two little girls. They're going to be at Union Elementary School. I obviously have concerns about that. I have concerns because the planes fly very low over my house. And yes, I signed the, I signed the disclosure when I bought. And these people in the houses are also going to presumably sign the same thing. But I also have concerns that my pilot neighbor also raised about our property values in Brookhaven. And, this should all be stuff that's taken under consideration. I'm curious about what the representative from Silverthorne Homes was representing with respect to the price of these homes. I mean, we're concerned about having low value homes that are placed north of us. I've searched through Zillow while we're doing this. I haven't seen anything over 400,000 that are in these communities. These are not high-end homes that are being proposed here. I mean, I'm looking at Flagstone Ridge, Stone Grove, Carlton Heights. These are topping out at about $350,000. This isn't, I think that's something that really needs to be considered here. And it wasn't what was being stated earlier. So I had concerns there. I also had concerns when I saw the plan that was put up there with a big retention pond. And I can tell you that in Brookhaven, we've got a ton of geese in our ponds. So going even further north, I know geese and plains don't mix. So I just have a lot of questions about this plan development. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Fry. I'm representing the Indy Exec Airport at 11329 East State Road 32. I'm also president of the Hamilton County Airport Authority, so I'm speaking for the authority as well. I want to clarify a few things that were said tonight concerning the history of this particular project. Mr. Andrioli stated that in 2006 that he discussed this original plot plan with the airport. That's not entirely correct. The engineers who worked for us, or Engineer Airport, was also retained, Mr. Schneider at Wolpert, and they looked at the plot plan mainly to provide advice regarding the safety of the area, as well as things like retention ponds and so forth. And the fact that the airport authority at the time, first of all, was probably still a board of commissioners then, but none of the present board members were on any of the boards then, so we can't say for sure what transpired, but no objection does not constitute support of this project. Secondly, there was no zoning study done by Boone County which authorized the rezoning request, to understand the implications of the rezoning and putting homes down in that current spot. Moving more recently, within the last year, the Airport Authority and our engineer were contacted by and met with Lennar Homes and their engineers, American Structure Point, in March of 2020, when they first presented plot plan for this particular property. We expressed our concerns over their plot plan, which showed homes extending all through the part of that property that's zoned as agriculture, and showed homes going up to and along 200 East, 200 South. We had several conversations with the people at Lennar Structure Point. We expressed our concerns over not only the density of housing and the proximity of the housing to the airport, but also to the retention ponds that they showed, which were right in line with the runway. And as the previous speaker talked about, geese are attracted to water and to standing retention ponds, and geese and jet engines rarely make a good combination. We were contacted again in September of 2020 by representatives of American Structure Point on behalf of Arbor Homes, Silverthorne Homes, regarding a new proposal for homes on that same piece of property. The plot plan we saw was dated 15th October 2020 and also showed homes in the ag restricted area, or the area that still retains their agricultural zoning, and also showed retention ponds that were directly in line with the runway. We expressed concerns over all these issues and made the recommendation. I think the comment also came up that our engineer said that was the worst design near an airport he'd ever seen. In December 2020, we requested the developer to give us an updated idea of what the new plot plan was going to be. We never heard from them at that time. In May of this year, Producers Realty filed for plot approval for a development called Union Woodlands on the property in question. And while the 2021 plot plan excludes homes from the northern part of the property, which is now zoned ag, it does contain retention ponds that will attract waterfowl. You saw from the diagram that was shown up on the screen, the largest retention pond in that proposed development is in direct line with the center line of our runway. The current plan is close to that proposed in 2006. However, since 2006, a number of things have happened. First of all, as Chris Snyder reiterated, FAA standards have significantly changed in that period of time. So some of the requirements, recommendations or circulars by the FAA that were in place during the 2006 design are not valid. Economic growth in this area has resulted in a concomitant growth in business jet traffic at TYQ relative to what was there in 2006. There's been no changes in the current plan to the 2006 plan regarding wildlife. The current plan now shows a large retention pond less than 4,000 feet from the end of the runway and in line with it. In about 2018, TYQ conducted a wildlife hazard study that highlighted waterfowl dangers both on site as well as in the surrounding area. And we're told to take active steps to reduce both on and off airport property. There's also a circular by the FAA that concerns retention ponds. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, isn't it 10,000 feet from a runway? So it says no retention pond should be within 10,000 feet of an active runway. Just one last thing, a question that came up about the residential. There's a specific difference between single family houses and that are proposed in this development versus the apartment type houses that are proposed in the airport village. First of all, apartments by definition will have a higher average noise ratio just because apartment doors tend to be in many cases young and noisy. and you tend to find a lot more background noise in an apartment complex than you would get in a residential area. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Chris Snyder with Wolpert. I will be brief. Since we have met with the developer on some of the critical concerns and the design standards, they have made several changes. So this is reflecting what has been submitted. There is one significant issue, and it is big. So I will try to clarify this, is that most accidents and incidences that occur in the air at an airport occur off the ends of the runway in the immediate proximity of the approach. And that usually happens because of land development that's in that area, and that is when it becomes more catastrophic. And I tell you this, not to scare you. You guys had a big night already. So I'm not here to threaten. That's not going to get anything. But I will tell you that they do plan on putting in a wet detention pond per the plan. We did express those concerns and looking at dry detentions or something that would drain within a reasonable amount of time. And that is not what is being proposed. So I would ask you give serious consideration to the drainage proposal on this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi again, Tyson Clemmer, 11316 Still Creek Drive in Zionsville. One point that I do think is important to clarify, I thought I may, President France may have heard a comment about homes within this neighborhood will not be directly within the flight path or closer than any existing home within Brookhaven. I think what I briefly saw on the plot plan, there would in fact be homes directly south of the runway, closer than any existing home within Brookhaven. So per the prior discussions, I do understand the apparent obligation to entertain potential residential development in this area. But I do think it is very important to consider the safety implications, as just briefly noted, of residential homes directly within the flight path. And so that's safety impact for both the residents, but also the location of retention ponds and the implications to pilot safety as well. So obviously you need to entertain the petition, but I do think there are serious safety concerns as presented to you today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else?
Good evening, Brian Traylor again. So I want to give a little bit of background on maybe why I'm so passionate on this. I grew up in an aviation family. My father is a retired pilot. He also managed the FBO, which is essentially the working office of a small community airport when I was a child. So I have a pretty good knowledge, just shy of perhaps our airline pilot in the room, of airports, aircraft. But in addition to that, in 2002, I was working in Lexington, Kentucky and I'll get to why I remember this so well. I was working for a company called Robert Half. We had a nice high-rise office, and I saw outside of that window an airplane come off the end of the runway in Lexington, Kentucky. That has stuck with me for my entire life, because I saw the explosion. And the reason it stuck with me so much is because at that time, they announced what kind of aircraft it was, and that was it. Happened to be the same type of aircraft that my father was flying in and out of that same airport. So it kind of stuck with me because there's not that many of that particular aircraft going in and out of that airport. But seeing that happen, witnessing it firsthand, it doesn't happen often. It's not likely to happen, but it can happen, and it does happen. Putting a neighborhood at the end of this runway is extremely dangerous. Had I been on town council, in prior neighborhoods when they were recommended, when Union Elementary was recommended, I probably would have been standing here in the same position, lobbying against it as well. That is not the case. I am here today because I can do something about this and not make the problem worse than it currently is. So I would ask for this to be denied strictly on the safety, on the case of safety. It's just not a good idea to have a neighborhood at the end of the runway. And even if they're giving, land as a park, do we really want an airplane if an accident were to happen, if somebody were to have to ground the airplane at the end of the runway? Is it any better that it go into a park? So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on this? Sure. We'll come back around, so.
My name is Gary Magoni, and I live at 1134 Glen Avon Way. And if you look at the map, if you look at the plot of Brookhaven, our street was the last one developed and backs directly up to this 160 acres that's been debated all night. Now, just a couple points. First of all, Mr. Jones asked earlier that, what about the profiles and prices of the homes? Well, the home beside me just sold for $850,000. The home right across the street from me just sold for around $800,000. Okay. These homes that are being suggested are basically starter homes. I mean, they may have a few amenities on them, and there's lots of those over at Whitestown if you would like to go over there. But we have a beautiful community there at Brookhaven. And that whole street was here at the last meeting when you gave a continuance. So those folks were at some of the meetings last night that were held, and they didn't think anything was going to be debated tonight, so they didn't show up. But I will tell you that most of those folks, that street was just finished over the last 2 years. And most of those folks are in shock because they didn't realize what was happening behind them. So the gentleman back here that was debating, saying that wasn't really, a lot of people just didn't know about whether the airport or the expansion plans and things like that when they bought the homes, was exactly right. The other thing is I have family that teaches up at Union School. And that school, from what I understand, is pretty much maxed out. So what's the town of Zionsville going to do with 179 homes that, bless their hearts, are going to have a lot of young people over there? And that's an issue, along with a lot of other infrastructure issues, as well as the roads and things like that. So I just wanted to say that if you, if I understand it correct, you just made a motion that you're going to recommend that the rezoning not go through. So if you put homes there, at least put homes that are equal to what's all up on that area of town, which are very nice, which are big homes. I mean, anywhere from about 5,500 feet to 7,000 feet, and that are comparable. Because of the land values are going to go down if you build a bunch of starter homes. And they don't like to refer to their homes as starter homes, but that's exactly what they are. So I'm just asking that you consider that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else like to comment? Would you like to respond?
Yes, sir. So there's been a lot to discuss tonight. So I'm gonna try to make this quick. As I already said, we're in compliance with zoning. I would like to point out that zoning under R3, I believe, has a set density, but the zoning commitments on this property allow us to go up to, I think it's 240 lots. The minimum lot width is only 50 foot and a lot size of 5,000 square feet. We are way above all of that. We are in full acknowledgement that this is Zionsville, the market value of the land that hopefully we aren't ever debating beyond our negotiations to purchase the property does not support our traditional arbor product. We could have, under the current zoning, came in here with arbor, met the zoning, maxed out the 240, but we're not doing that. market capitalism, market economy wouldn't allow us to do that because of the price of the land. The numbers I gave earlier are rough estimates. We've never built in Zionsville before. The numbers that were quoted, they're from Zillow. I'm not sure how accurate they are, but our starting pricing in McCordsville, which is where Stone Grove that was mentioned, is posted online. Our starting pricing for Flagstone and Carlton Heights, which are in Noblesville, is posted online. That is our starting pricing. We usually have at least $80,000 of options put into homes beyond that, because we do have a design center. All of our buyers come in and meet with a professional designer as they pick out their cabinets and furnishes within the home. Traffic's been mentioned. We've done a traffic study. The FAA has come up a lot. We've hadn't heard enough from attorneys, I think, hopefully. I don't want to go into the difference between circulars, memorandum, and federal regulation. Those are all different things. We will have to meet all federal regulations. I think the only one of those that was mentioned tonight was the app permit that we will have to file to demonstrate that we are below the maximum height. That is a process that we will have to go through because of our proximity to the airport. We've already ran our preliminary topographic study to ensure before we got to this point that we were fully comfortable meeting that with all of our homes. At the end of the day, this is a ministerial approval. It's my understanding that under 1109, we are entitled to the zoning as it is. And if our application does not meet that, we're entitled to be given notice as to why it does not, so that we have an opportunity to amend that. I believe, and I'm in agreement with staff, that we do meet the requirements, and would ask for you to follow the law and give us a approval of the preliminary plat. Thank you all for your time tonight. I know with last night and tonight, it's been a long few evenings. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I guess with that, Wayne, I'll ask for the staff report.
Certainly, and as discussed, the petition that's in front of you this evening is a preliminary plat, conversation related to 179 lots subdivision. The charge of the town and the staff is to review the project and the proposal against the subdivision control ordinance, as well as the zoning ordinance that's in place at the time of the filing discussed previously. Staff finds that the project proposal is in conformance. We do mention some items throughout the staff report and certainly the engineering letter. Certainly this traffic has been a topic. The town of Zionsville requires in all cases filing of a traffic study that is a part of the filing. Certainly recommendations and comments are found within that document. Additionally, this particular subdivision, as well as all subdivisions, will be paying into the road impact fee fund, which is a fund that then is used to facilitate roadway improvements throughout Zionsville and specifically this area. Again, staff is supportive of the petition as it's presented, and we're happy to answer your questions.
All right, thank you. At this point, I'll open it up to members of the Plan Commission. Questions, comments?
There were several comments made about dry retention. What are staff's thoughts on incorporating that to aid in safety versus a wet basin?
The town engineer has reviewed the project against the drainage ordinance. If that's certainly, as safety has been discussed, if there's items that can be done to enhance the safety, certainly if that's definitely advantageous. However, the town is bound to review the project against the subdivision control ordinance, and it does not necessarily, and the town's drainage ordinance, which does not take other issues into play that may have been discussed this evening in terms of water, elimination of ponds of water because of birds and potential issues with planes. The petitioner can speak probably more eloquently to that topic.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand where our obligation goes beyond what is stated in that stormwater requirement to protecting the safety of the residents, because we see a known problem that may not exist in 99.5% of the rest of the acreage of Zionsville, that happens to exist in this 0.5%, and addressing that as part of the review. Is there an obligation to do that above and beyond the drainage requirements?
I don't think we can require them to do something that's not in the ordinances.
Right. I think maybe I would address it the other way around. And that is that when you have a rezone or a planned unit development proposal before you, you can address almost any issue you want, and that, dry detention, alternative stormwater measures, what the price point is of the house, what the exterior is on the house, where the roads are going to be, what the park's going to look like. Those things are all fair game. Those are all fair game. If a petitioner brings to you a submittal and they are requesting waivers from your ordinance, that frees up a little bit as long as you can show a nexus, a connection between the waiver and what you're talking about. In a preliminary plat, your job is to simply say, have they met our ordinance? Now, your zoning ordinance or your subdivision control ordinance could require developers who are within a certain radius of the airport to use dry detention, but it doesn't. And so at this stage, at this particular moment, when you're looking at this particular submission, as the staff report says, you're supposed to look at three things. And I'm going to paraphrase them a little bit for the sake of brevity, but essentially that is, are the lots drawn correctly? Or is there an adequate provision for roads which complies with your road standards? Are the roads the right width? Do they have the right radii and so forth on the turns? And then does the plat provide for the adequate provision of the extension of utilities? Are the utility easements on the plat and so forth? These kinds of cases are really pretty simple. And this case may show a need to amend a zoning ordinance to talk about dry detention, but you don't have the ability to require anything of the petitioner that the ordinance doesn't require. It is really.
Ask a quick question though. Aren't regulated drains part of the municipal services that benefit the entire town of Zionsville?
You mean a legal drain?
Legal drain, registered, correct. The creeks and the regulated drains and any of the other swales, grading done to move water from one portion of the town to another.
Well, regulated drains are designed for the benefit of everyone in the watershed.
It's a municipal service.
Well, it
My concern is
be, and it
my
could be
concern is
private
the
too.
retainage pond that we're looking at here is not really adequate for our town's needs, and that it is creating what appears to be a public hazard, and that's of concern. So I don't think he's met, of what you just said. There's three items we check: lot size, adequate provisions for widths and grades of the roads, and then adequate provisions for the extension of water, sewer, and other municipal services. And if the extension of those other municipal services, we perceive it's going to create a hazard, I'd like to see that vetted out a little better.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. I would just say that you have a stormwater ordinance that imposes all sorts of obligations on developers for what the town expects. And I'm just saying you can only hold them to your ordinances. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I'm just trying to get some clarity on. The other question too cropped up, and we keep talking around it. There was different comments about homes in the flight path. There's an exhibit 3 in here that I guess I'm struggling to understand when you talk about flight path and homes in it, it appears that there's homes in it unless I'm not understanding what this exhibit 3 is showing me.
I think on the
This is a different
original
question.
documentation that actually Mr. Andrioli provided, I guess there's a kind of like a no-fly zone for lack of a better word. So they build houses up to that line and then the houses are built. Yeah, they're in the flight path, but they're not in that section where they're
Correct.
recommending that there's no planes. Is that correct?
I'm looking for the exhibit 3.
It's the colored.
They're not in the runway protection zone.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Runway protection zone.
Yeah.
So how far does the runway, I'm sorry, how far does the runway protection zone extend off the end of the runway?
To the back line of those houses, probably.
Does anybody know what that is? Am I missing a point?
Uniquely, that information is contained within the airport study that is online. Certainly for just for reference here, page 24 is the existing runway protection zone illustrated. Certainly, Mr. Howard here might be able to speak to what that looks like when it's extended, if it's extended due to the runway extension project.
The runway protection zone, talking to our engineers, this is not in the runway protection zone where anything would be prohibited. That would be an area that we, on the other end, we used eminent domain to take down some trees and so forth, but this is not in the runway protection zone. It is in the noise sensitive area. 2 different standards. The noise sensitive area is a disclosure issue. The RPZ is a thou shalt not. This is not, none of these homes are in that area.
So I'm going to respect Mr. Taylor's comment before, but I'm going to ask this question anyway, even though I can't enforce it. Do you guys have a copy of the noise exposure map for the airport?
I believe we do.
Do you know what the decibel level is over your property, where your residences are? Do you know what decibel level HUD deems acceptable for over residences?
I do not. Like I said, I've been out there and listened.
Do you know if your construction of your houses gets your interior decibel level to 45 decibels, which is considered acceptable by HUD?
I know that we will have to do that. I mean, one, there's state law for the noise sensitive area that has been discussed and we have to follow. And we will be in compliance with the HUD.
And I know there are some covenants in the original document that was signed, but those won't get you there. So just FYI.
Thank you.
Because that should be a concern of yours. If you don't have that information, you shouldn't be moving forward with the project until you do, and you understand it.
And just circling back, page 28 within the draft study illustrates the future runway protection zone. Again, just for reference.
People had questions about the traffic. I'd say, to be honest, this is probably one of the best traffic study reports I've seen. I mean, compared to the stuff we've seen. So I think traffic based upon this is not going to be the issue that people are going to anticipate it would be. The other thing is there was a question about the covenants not reflecting the required declarations, and I'm going to assume that we'll make that as a condition of this, is that the covenants do reflect appropriate requirements, material requirements as stated.
Yes, absolutely. The recorded plat and recorded covenants will.
Okay.
Wayne, since you brought it up, page 28 of that document, do you know if that future runway is the 7,000 foot runway or the 7,700 foot runway? And the reason I ask is right now that runway protection zone stops right at the edge of these houses. If it's the 7,000 foot runway and they add another 700 foot, it wipes out those houses.
Mr. Andreoli, do you have a comment on that? You might be able to clarify it from the original.
Yes, I might suggest that all we knew and all the neighborhood knew years ago was that the airport was going to increase their runway when we did the zoning ordinance and zone this property, the 160 acres to an R3 to 7,000 feet. We were shocked when we went and understood that they increased it by another 700 feet. That was never the plan back then. And it does go right to the edge of the housing, but it doesn't go into the housing itself. So it's very close.
With the 7,700 foot runway.
It still does not go into the housing.
That, I was just trying to make sure this was showing the longer runway length and not
Yeah.
the shorter runway.
That
length.
wasn't part of the original commitments. That wasn't part of the original understanding. If you look at the map that was furnished to us previously, it was a 7,000 foot runway. They were going to move an additional 1,500. And then when we met with them a year and a half ago, we determined that they apparently, for whatever reason, decided to bump that up. We understood that was all they were ever going to need is 7,000, but apparently they bumped it another 700 feet. Doesn't change what we were going to do because we left that whole area ag,
Okay.
which we can't do anything with anyway. So,
all right.
Thank you.
and at the time, I might even suggest this. At the time, we suggested that if they even needed some of that ground, depending on who the entity was that would take it for light stanchions or anything like that, from a safety standpoint, that we would work with them in that regard to try to make sure those things were located in that ag area that was in the runway protection zone. They've not requested that. So I suspect that we'll just move along with the original plan, but we indicated we'd be happy to work with them with regard to lighting if they needed it at some point. So.
All right, thank you.
And just for clarification, on page 26 of the draft study that was discussed last evening, there's references to figures 3.3 and 3.4, which is pages 27 and 28 in the study. Page 27 illustrates is figure 3.3, which speaks to the RPZ, the runway protection zone, in a phase 1 pattern. Page 28 is illustrative of the phase 2 of the future runway protection zone. Phase 2 correlates to the language on page 26, which is referencing a 7,700 foot long runway.
Thank you.
Certainly.
All right. All right, is there anything further?
Wayne. So if this sits for, and I don't think this is a long shot, but if for some reason this sits for another 10, 15 years like it did with the zoning, do our sunset laws kick in place on this where the plat would be removed after a certain amount of time? Or I can't remember how we said this set up. In other words, if this did not get built out for some reason and we had this plat laid out, we can pull that plat down the road. So we don't end up with the problem, having to address this again in 5-10 years with a different developer or something.
Well, the section 1109 entitlement we talked about earlier does have a time limit. So it would be that entitlement that could go away if the property were rezoned. There is a way that an owner can lose their entitlement if they don't take action over the number of years identified in that section. So it might be, and then your ordinance has a couple of deadlines where approvals expire as well.
All right, with that, is any further discussion? If not, would somebody want to make a motion on this matter?
I move the docket 2021-21-PP petition for primary plat approval to provide for 179 lots in rural R3 residential zoning district be approved
as presented.
The condition
Yes, with condition.
that the material
The plat, the recorded plat and the covenants comply with the commitments.
With the,
do you accept that?
I accept that, yes.
Okay. All right, is there a second on that matter?
Second.
Is there any further discussion, comment? Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly. Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Mrs. Madrick,
Aye.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Oh, nay. All right, so the motion carries 6-1. The plat's approved. On to the last item of the night, hopefully. Pretty sure it is. 2 items. Keep our friends at Holiday Farms always waiting. There's more guys. We're gonna let things clear out here and then we'll finish this up.
You're clear.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break, restroom break for some people up in the dais.
Worked around the natural.
Well, that's just like that sleep guy. that-
There's nobody left in the audience.
Zionsville needs social media.
Maybe I'm on.
That's the one thing that-
All right, are they on? Okay, we're gonna bring up the items on docket number 2021-24 PP and 2021-25 DP, Holiday Farm, Section 7. Petition for primary plat approval with waivers to provide for 38 lots, 19 single-family residents, 19 commercial lots in the PUD Planned Unit Development Zoning District, and the petition for development plan approval to provide for the development of a 64.17 plus or minus acre site into 38 lots, 19 single-family residences, and 19 commercial lots in the PUD Planned Earth Unit Development Zoning District. Petitioner online? If so, please state your name, address, and start.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. For the record, Phil Sunling here with the Hankey Development Group. As always, we really appreciate your time and certainly your consideration this evening. I typically like to provide you all with updates on where we stand on the development as a whole. But since we were just here a few weeks back and it's been a rather long agenda, I'll aim to stay brief tonight. In front of you for consideration is Holiday Farm Section 7, which we are proposing 19 single-family detached lots, varying size, along with 19 commercial lots, all of which is on just over 64 acres. This portion of the development is located in the northeast corner of our property, east of Hole 12, and generally bound by US 421 to our direct east. As a recap to our discussions from the public hearing back in June, a few items were noted to be addressed on our end. First, prior to the June meeting, we had just wrapped up discussions with NDOT a couple of days before. They had requested that we adjust our access points onto US 421. We pulled off a right out only just south of our main entry which is known as Rogers Parkway. Additionally, we removed a right in, right out just north of that main entry as well. We're actively working through NDOT through their permitting process now, and we'll have their approval in conjunction with the construction document approval with the town when the time comes. But the latest version of the site plan that you guys have now is what we worked through with them. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Jones, I believe you specifically requested at that meeting in June for some additional detail on how things will actually look when we develop this area. I pulled a number of photos along with a projected site plan for a user that we're currently actively working with. Our architectural style will mimic much of what we've seen in New Albany in Ohio. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. Incredible community, very high end. This photo here is actually from our visit there in New Albany. We will require in this area heavy built up masonry. We'll have trimmed out built up storefronts, as you can see here, with very high end trim details. Again, a very classy Williamsburg-like feel, very similar to what you see on our gatehouse at our main entry. We retained David Rouse from Rouse Studio in Zionsville to perform detailed architectural reviews on all of our commercial building submittals. He's done a number of those already, preliminary submittals with some of the groups we've been working with. His understanding of our vision and obviously his expertise for high-end architecture is off the charts. And we're excited to lean on him as we start getting some of these projects going in what we're calling the marketplace. Additionally, Mr. Franz, I think you requested that we incorporate wayfinding signage on all of our public trail system within Holiday Farms, and we're absolutely on board with that. We've actually started on it. We're currently working with some branding folks now for some trail signage. We will incorporate this into our construction docs for Section 7. Obviously, we'll carry that on throughout all the development. We've built a portion of the Turkey Foot already, I think, in Section 2. We built most of the Holiday Trail in Section 1. So we'll make sure we get the wayfinding signage carried really throughout the entire development. And we'll be sure to work with, I think his name is Jared Logsden from your guys' office and Parks Department. We'll work with him to make sure he's comfortable with everything that we put out there. And then also regarding the trail system, let me rip through some of these photos. I'll kind of show you this exhibit here. This is also from New Albany. again, mimics the architecture that we're envisioning for the commercial users there. I think one of the biggest items, and it shows up in staff's report, is regarding the trail. I know we talked at length about it back in June. We feel very strongly that it should go internal. We feel like you all agreed in the June meeting, but I think Wayne and his staff report, they feel strongly that it should go along 421. Again, our preference from a safety and interest in quality standpoint is to put it along the internal street system. This photo here kind of shows how that would interact. As you can see on the right side, there's a really wide path there. It would function very similarly. You may have some outdoor seating at one of the buildings, and just outside of that, you'd have kids on bikes, moms pushing strollers, whatever, trail users in front of these stores. We think, again, limiting the interaction between motorists and users of the trail is a key component to that, not to mention the interaction with some of the cool features at Holiday Farm. So again, we feel very strongly that it should go internal. I know staff feels differently. They feel strongly that it should go on US 421. If Plan Commission's desire is to put it along 421, we're on board. We'll follow suit. We do a lot of high-end developments. We visit hundreds of developments across the nation. We go to a lot of sites. I feel like Steve especially is an expert when it comes to this kind of stuff, and he's pretty adamant about it running internal. But again, if there's a sentiment from you all that we need to put it along 421, obviously we'll follow suit. So I just want to make that clear. And then the last item of discussion was public versus private streets. I think we've gotten that worked out with staff. I've worked with Lance and his group along with the Boone County Highway. We've delineated proper areas to separate the private versus public. All the residential obviously will remain private. We've made commitments to Zionsville and to Boone County that we will maintain it through the winter. We'll salt it, we'll plow it, we'll maintain all the landscaping. We've also committed to build the infrastructure above or we will meet or exceed the town's or the county's requirements, whichever are more stringent. With that, we are excited, of course, to keep the momentum going at Holiday. We've got a lot of momentum. It's incredible, the success we've had here. It's a testament to Zionsville, really. It's a great community. People want to be here. It's gone really, really well. We're excited to get some of the commercial going. It's a very well planned, very thought out commercial area. I think you guys will all be proud of it. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll ask this question in case there's somebody online, but is there anybody in the public who'd like to make a comment on this matter? Nope, we got a person. Pardon? All right, so he's still sharing the screen, but go ahead, state your name, address, and begin. Check to see if you're on mute, please.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, can.
Great. Yeah, hi, my name's Brad Gressel, 3668 Evergreen Way. And to Phil's point, I was one of the individuals I had last meeting, had some comments about the pathway specifically. I still feel the same. I personally strongly agree with the staff's position to require the pathway to be an outer frontage. I think there's a clear distinction between like a connected pathway system and some of the internal sidewalks that Phil has kind of showed in that that development in Ohio is in a very different community. It's a very kind of meandering just by design. So a lot of these kind of off the beaten path routes make a lot more sense in that area. There's a Zionsville comprehensive plan for a network of pathways and connectors, and there's a reason why all new developments in Zionsville are required to have frontage paths on the outside, and that's to eventually connect into a system that residents can take advantage of. this specific area, as it continues to grow, residents are certainly going to walk and bike up and down to the village and want to connect to the existing Willow Road path. I just don't see any necessary reason why they can't do this as well, other than just kind of preference not to in the current, wanting to have more interest. I just quickly, I wanted to kind of break the section 7 into 2 areas to discuss the top portion of the route that runs through the commercial portion. There is a Holiday Farms pedestrian network plan that was produced by Henke as part of this development. It, at the time, at least, clearly showed a straight frontage path along Michigan Road in this area. Obviously, they've pulled that now behind these commercial buildings to the west. Their proposed path would also come to an abrupt 90-degree wall, essentially at the north end, where the original farm would be, which is not convenient. I would encourage everyone to kind of visualize what that experience would of a non-straight path would be like. I see they have sidewalks on both Frederick Place and Rogers Parkway that run perpendicular off Marketplace Drive, but then they terminate before they reach 421. There will be an eventual traffic intersection at one of these, as far as my understanding. So having these sidewalks is good for that eventual crossing. I just believe the developer should be required to extend frontage paths off of those. I know they've mentioned that cost wasn't a concern for a high-profile project like this. As you look to the southern portion of Section 7, one of the, I would say, problems now is that the commission kind of previously approved a variance for Section 4 to allow for a small section of the pathway to be installed into Holiday Farms at Holiday Farms Boulevard, I guess. That the developer was very specific about the look they wanted for their entrance, and this was for the path not to run in front of it, not to remove trees, and this was approved. So that part, I guess, is done. So now the commission has kind of, there's sort of a tough spot because this approved variance has happened in the past. So, why not again? So it's just that this variance request is now asking to pull the path even further in my mind, more meandering. I just think variances and deviations to pathway requirements should only be considered when deemed like necessary. We don't have any other options, not just because of preference or some of the things I've mentioned. To me, the proposed path in this lower section around the gate here almost certainly, at least intentionally or unintentionally, seeks to avoid building a pedestrian bridge over 421 where Cox Creek runs. If the developer did a frontage path as required, they would have to build this bridge here. I believe the town should require this to be built and paid for by the development while they still can. There's plenty of space to bring this now diverted path from Section 4 and run it directly back towards 421 on the south side. Then you could build that bridge and run it straight up 421. Yes, there'd still be a bypass around the gate because I guess that's going to have to be there, but it wouldn't be as significant as far back as broken up. I've walked what's now in there. Nice path, very scenic. I agree. It's very far back in there, and what they're asking for is even further back in there, and to use a path that's already built right along that first model home on the north, the Wedgwood model. It's right on that house. So you would have to, this is way off the path. So you could keep that path there. The cemetery access, which I know is a concern, is already back in there. But I think they should try to pull everything back along 421 as required. Traffic speeds were obviously mentioned, but if that was the case, I don't see why the proposed path actually runs back up to 421 after that diversion. So I don't see that as true reason for that. And if you look all the way down to like Target, I don't see other developments having problems with doing that frontage line. And finally, I just, I live in the development right across from this interest, why I have, interest in this. So I would like to have access to these paths. I know in the last meeting, there was one of the members mentioned that if somebody really wanted to get up and down 421, they thought there'd be a straight path on the east side of Michigan Road and that they could just, if somebody wanted to do that, it's available to them. But the problem is that doesn't exist. There isn't an eastern route. There's not one planned. So for now and for the foreseeable future, this western path is part of this project, the only route that residents are going to have available to them. I just believe that they should be able to tighten this up closer to 421 and as a frontage path. So thanks for your time.
All right, thanks. Mr. Sundling, would you like to comment?
Yeah, let me pull up. This is kind of a trail network map. Brad, first of all, I appreciate those comments. I'll try to address, there's a couple things I wrote down here. I'll try to address each of these. I think you mentioned the safety and why do we pull it back onto 421 on the north end and the south end. Again, that's to meet the town's requirement for the network to basically connect all the developments to the north and to the south. So I don't know if you guys can see my mouse here, but section 4 is here along 421. It routes internal. And again, like Brad mentioned, the goal there was to preserve our entry to mimic the old holiday trail or the holiday road here, the old historic roadway there. We'll route along this side up through here and into the commercial area. We did some rough math. I think I made note of this last time. It adds about 18 seconds to first trip to route through there. I think the point Brad may be missing is the major reason we're doing that is to eliminate this crossing here on the south side. It eliminates this crossing here on this side, and it eliminates this crossing here. It's mainly for safety. I think it adds interest, and that's a huge point. But the purpose of that is to eliminate some of those interactions with motorists, uncontrolled interactions. You got left turns coming in off of 421 into this area here. The signal will be warranted at some point, who knows when. But until that time comes, it'll be certainly a very dangerous situation. And to the point about it going internal, I think, Brad, I'm not sure if you are aware, this is the Holiday Trail here. It's a public trail that interconnects to the Turkey Foot. So I think you mentioned concerns with getting inside. We do, and we tout having a great trail network that connects to the Turkey Foot and ultimately down to the Turkey Foot park down there. So that's intentional. That's all part of the trail network plan, all master planned. It's something we feel strongly about. Obviously, a huge amenity, not only to our residents, but really to all of Zionsville. I think I addressed most of you. I don't know if there's anything I missed, but happy to answer any more questions you guys have.
All right, thanks. Anybody else have any comments? Is anybody else online? All right, Wayne, can we have staff report, please?
Certainly, staff is supportive of the petition. Certainly, focusing on this specific trail conversation topic. When this project was first vetted by the Redevelopment Commission, a trail was illustrated along the 421 frontage. Trails, as we know in Zionsville, are a very important component of our quality of life initiatives, and certainly it's Pathways Committee. Other groups serve to consider and talk about the maintenance and extensions and the livelihood of items that the town looks to leverage in its conversations about sustainability. Certainly, putting this pathway in this particular location, it meets objectives. It could be that future TIF dollars are used to put the pathway in along 421 if a waiver was granted. Certainly, I'm not here tonight to say that will happen, but the town's pathway system illustrates a pathway along 421. Pathways are more than just a pedestrian connectivity from point A to point B. They are going to be serving a larger multimodal type component. That experience that someone is looking to achieve may not be what they're looking to find, finding their way through this particular commercial area. Hence, this is where staff is coming from as far as supportive of the pathway along 421. It's contrary to the town's adopted plans. Not that that's why the waiver conversation is happening this evening. However, I wouldn't want to foreclose this conversation if a waiver is granted from the town still moving forward and putting the pathway in along 421 and utilizing the TIF district to facilitate that. But setting that aside, staff is not supportive of granting the waiver. Certainly appreciate the petitioner's creativity and certainly view and strong ideals and passion for what they're doing. They've very successful, but this is just one of these items that the staff is not agreeing to.
All right. With that, I'll open it up to questions from any of the commissioners.
Well, safety, everybody's been talking about tonight, and isn't that, and my question, not to insult them, but is it really safety, or is it to get people walking and biking through those shops so they'll go shopping? I mean, that was, I'm cynical. That was the first thing that came to my mind.
I mean,
and I don't care, but
I guess I would defer to the plan that Parks has put forward.
They put a lot of thought into it.
Doesn't seem like it's that much of a leap to go from Michigan if you want to go to the shops.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, did the plan, contemplate 3 curb cuts in a matter of 300 feet? I mean, that's, I do, as somebody that bikes, and quite often actually gets people that try to turn into the bike lane as I'm riding down the bike lane, they're not looking for me. They're looking for their next chance to make the cut across the road, and they're looking at the cars. And so they make that cut, and I've got to be watching for them, not them watching for us. And that is a safer route. It is a less ideal route if I'm a biker trying to use the trail to bike 20 miles. I probably don't want to slow down and meander through there and then come back out. You're probably going to have more kid bike collisions in that commercial district where a kid runs out of the shop with his ice cream cone and hits his bike screaming by. But that's going to hurt a lot less than the bike getting hit by a car. So, I mean, I do have a little bit of a safety concern, and how much perforation of that trail was contemplated when it was originally put along 421 in that location.
So you guys heard me down here rail on Appaloosa Trail for the last umpteen years. It's not that I have anything against Appaloosa Trail. What I'm tired of seeing is just strip retail commercial development. And the downside of what I was hoping, and what one of the pieces I'd asked for to see, was just a little better rendering of with these lots that are along 421, where exactly the parking is going to be. Because my experience has shown me, as much as I would like to see a more inward facing commercial development, they just don't do well. And we've talked about this, the villages of Clay West, their stuff, Stonegate. Yeah, it just, as much as you might like it, it doesn't work. So what's the happy medium? And so what I was hoping to see was something along the lines kind of showing that primarily the buildings are going to be more internally facing, but they are going to need some sort of visual representation out there in 421. I'm all for pulling the trail inside the development, specifically to get people off of 421 and into these shops, and just for a different path. as someone who's been downtown and watched the city of Indianapolis put in what we call the Golden Sidewalk, which is a combination of cultural trails and Monon Trail and the Pogue Run Trail. These things are a boon for business. They make a difference. I bought a building in Fountain Square 10 years ago, the Murphy Arts Center, and just got some luck that they put the cultural trail, that Brian Payne pushed it all the way down there, and it quadrupled the value of that building and every property down there, having that trail in front of it. And people are smart enough to figure out the walking on the one side, biking on the other. You know, you got scooters, you've got units, you got everything. There's still, yes, there's going to be more interaction between people and bikes and blah, 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 blah. But collectively, it's still a lot better and a lot more interesting than going up and down 421, where you're, you know, whatever, 20, 30 feet away from people doing 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. So, and finally, I think as part of the whole 421 development, there is going to be eventually a trail on the east side, a little more straighter shot. It's on the Appaloosa Trail piece. There's parts of it. I mean, it's not collectively all attached, and it's got separations and breaks in it. But this one is going to connect the commercial areas of Holiday Farms, you know, down to Willow Road, down to that trail. And that trail just runs on one side of the property, and it runs back and forth through Austin Oaks. And it, you know, it works, you know, so I'm all for what they're doing. And bringing it in. And then, yeah, it does get a little odd there on the very north end where it makes that hard 90, but I'm assuming it's because they haven't quite come up with a plan for the old house. Is that what's happening up there? It does make, you know, that hard, funny 90 back out to 421.
Yeah, Larry, it's Phil here. Yeah, that's something, I mean, obviously we could look at softening up those radii to make them a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, that's the old historic home. We're trying to highlight the historic home there, so you're going alongside it. But yeah, if that's something that's a concern, we could.
But is there a plan for the use of that? There's kind of the road kind of dead ends up there, and
yeah, that's I think we're planning there a multifamily project at some point. That'll tie all into that on the north end.
Yeah, I do think trying to swoop that out at a 45 instead of a 90.
Sure.
So you got two 45s would, I mean, on a bike, taking a 90's not real ideal.
Understood. Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
I saw some notes in there about a wood rail. Is that what's going along the pond besides the trail?
Yep, that's correct. That'll go along the entire length of that pond.
Any further discussion? So on the primary plat, we have four motions. Motion for each waiver, and then a motion for the primary plat itself. Somebody like to begin?
Did we do 21, 24 first, or?
Yeah, 24. So it's page 5 of 24 PP.
Let's
Got the
see.
PP first, right?
Yeah.
I move that waiver number. The design, is that what we're just reading through that? The design speed
Yep.
standards? Okay. I move that waiver number 1, design speed standards be approved based on the findings of facts as presented. Number 2, the street.
Do we have, I think we have to do each one individually. Is that correct?
Oh, you can
You
combine
both
them if you
combine.
want.
All right, so,
You just have to do the waivers first.
okay.
Let's
All
get that out of the way, but Larry can do all three if he wants.
right, the only, I would do 1 and 2 together, and 3 maybe separately, just in case there's
Okay.
different votes.
Got it. I move that waiver number 1, design speed standards be approved based on the findings of fact as presented. Number 2, street blade standards be approved based on the findings of facts as presented. I move that docket number 2021-24-PP.
No, we gotta do the waivers first.
Yeah, I second the motion he made.
For the
with
two
first
waivers. All right.
Okay.
So we have a second. Any further discussion? Wayne, roll call because Cindy's online.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Mrs. Madrick,
Aye.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker.
All right, so waiver 3.
I move that waiver number 3, alternate transportation plan, be approved based on the findings of facts as presented.
Is there a second?
Would you accept an amendment to adjust the trail at the north end
Yes.
to soften both turns away from 90s?
All right, so he accepts that. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so once again, any further discussion? Wayne, would you roll call, please?
Certainly. Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Mrs. Madrick,
Aye.
Mr. Franz,
Nay.
Mrs. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake.
Aye.
All right, that carries 6-1. That waiver is approved. And then now the docket itself.
So I move the docket number 2021-24-PP petition for primary plat approval with waivers to provide for 38 lots, 19 single-family residences, and 19 commercial lots in the PUD Planned Unit Development Zoning District be approved as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly, we'll start with Mrs. Madrick. Mrs. Madrick,
Aye.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 7-0. That plat is approved. And then on to the development plan.
I need my beauty sleep. Come on, somebody make a motion.
I got it.
I move the docket 2021-25-DP Development Plan Petition to provide for development of a 64.17 acre site into 38 lots, 19 single-family residents, 19 commercial lots in the PUD Planned Unit Development Zoning District be approved with conditions as noted in the staff report upon the findings as presented.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly, Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mrs. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Lake,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Mrs. Madrick.
Aye.
And that motion carries 7-0. Development plan is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right, anything further, Wayne?
Just very briefly, for your next agenda, we'll be adding a policy discussion about conducting electronic meetings. That's just something to move forward. This, a lot of things we've learned from the pandemic in terms of operating an electronic meeting, and clarifying for the week of September 20th are the weeks that we're talking about the zoning charrettes that we'll be hosting across the community. Larry's looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about, and that's very true. You weren't here last night. So in conformance with our form-based code efforts, we will be hosting community-wide meetings the week of September 20th. That's our plan. And we'll be in each township and then ending that conversation here at Town Hall to talk about what we learned. More news on that here soon.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Do we have to sign something, I presume?